If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, I'm excited today. We have our first Tiffy here. Now those people who don't know what's a Tiffy, that's what we call the mechanics. You know, the guys who fix the vehicles, grease mechanics, sometimes grease monkeys, I'm sure we call them that too. And this on the other side is grinning when I use the word grease monkey. Dries, you are most welcome here with us. Thank you, mate. I have to tell all of you, I've met some wonderful people on this show, and because of this show, I've met Dries. He's in Australia now. I'm still in Swineland. And as you can see behind me, I'm still in the house. Rebecca's got the dreaded disease. And the only real thing which he did to her is in the first day of her being confined to her house, as he started cleaning the cupboards at 4:30 in the morning. May I say, with a lot of noise and lights. And then this morning at about the same time, she started coughing, and then we had to get all the old boerenrate and things out. But she's fine. Thank you for all of you who sent me all of kind of nice suggestions and letters. Thank you for that. But we're not here to talk about me. I'm excited to have our first Tiffy here. I can tell you, everybody I spoke to, from Special Forces to 6-1 Meg, everybody said to me, get these Tiffys and tell them they did a splendid job under difficult circumstances. So, Dries, thank you for being here. May I ask you, where do you come from and how did you end up in the South African Army?
Hello, Koos. Firstly, thank you for having me, Koos. It's been a long time since those days, but yes, I'll start from the beginning, give a bit of a background. I was born in a city, Benoni. I can recall, and the reason why I just want to mention this briefly, because is the day I was born, and for the people that's going to follow this little bit of a legacy conversation between me and yourself, is that I'm trying to tell it as a story. So what happened was, Koos, is that my father didn't even know I was born. Funny enough, I was born in a little clinic back then. It was a little clinic called the Glenwood. Now it's a big multi-story hospital. And funny enough, when the nurse came out, there was a slight drizzle. And the nurse asked my father, which was sitting under a small little tree, hiding from the rain, and he had his little half-jack brandy in his inside pocket. And she asked him, she said, hi, sir, you know, what are you waiting for? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he said, I'm waiting for my son, you know. And she said, your son is born half an hour already. And that started it all. That's where it started all, of course. And I would like to just mention that as a follow-up on what's going to happen next to me in my life.
Yes, because I understand you're from a family of mechanics, actually. Now, I have to say to people, my father, bless his soul, was a man who did not believe in servicing his own vehicle or anything like that. He always said the mechanic will also have to make money. He was a strong believer in that. So I know nothing about vehicles. I can change a spare wheel, I can check for oil. But if that thing breaks down, I call people like you. But I understand you had a hard life. You ended up in the orphanage. And before we get to that, I just want to say to people, there's something else which came to my attention. That in South Africa, and I don't know in other places, but when you turn 18 years old, you are kicked out of an orphanage. Whether you're still at school or not, it doesn't matter. By law, you're not allowed there anymore. So they give you, well, I suppose, 10 rand in the pocket for a train ticket and a jacket or a few pieces of clothing, and you've got to go. Dries, is that true? Is that what happened to you as well?
Chris, thank you. Yeah, that's 100% correct. Sadly, like I said, and that's why I mentioned the half jack in the middle pocket. I'm sure the people that's listening or watching will understand now the next chapter. So yeah, Chris, as I grew up, we had a very nice hobby farm in an area called Bradell, and sadly, the half jacks became bigger and bigger and bigger, and it became more and more problematic as a family. And I'll never forget it. We were taken to Benoni, to the social welfare or the welfare, however you want to call it. And I'll never forget it. It was a little white beetle. And we were taken there, and we were taken to a place in Johannesburg called, the suburb was called Linmeyer. And I was basically just in the beginning stages of having to go to school age. And my parents basically, my father wasn't involved, said goodbye to us, and we were dropped off. And the place was called the President Kruger Kinderhuis, President Kruger orphanage, if you want to translate it directly in English. And yeah, that's where my life started as a little kid, as a school-going kid, if you want to put it that way. My brother, I've had two sisters, twins, and then the three of us went together. However, my younger brother stayed behind because he was still he was like an infant, basically. He was still a baby. But he did join us later on in life. And the reason why I mentioned that is that's part of the story, as how I grew up in the orphanage or in the children's home. The children's home wasn't a nice place. Of course, I just want to just briefly mention, it wasn't really a nice place to be, especially from a very young age. There's what we all refer to as a pecking order. There's a fair amount of bullying going on there. People don't believe it, but it's true. And we also had to, on Saturdays and Sundays, do some work, garden work. And that's where I've learned how to milk cows. Funny enough, we've had cows. We had a little tractor, a little Landini tractor that we used. We had a big dam with a bore, and plenty of peach trees, swimming pool, fair enough, but we weren't allowed to swim. We were separated in groups, the males, boys from the girls, if you want to call it that way. Anyway, that's basically how it go. There was a fair chunk of infights, where it's almost, if you want to call it, the gladiators. Our version of gladiators. Where you have to fight against your friend, to the amusement of the bigger guys. And the more blood there is, the more interesting the the brawl is, if you want to call it that way, course. And then for me, it left scars. I don't know. I'm trying to tell it, tell it as in my real. Someone might relate to my real as well. I mean, it was 100 of us in that children's home, and we had to do everything in a normal life, but that love and that togetherness just wasn't there, And like I say, there was a lot of interactions going on with the bigger boys. I'll give you one example. When I was a little bit older, there was a guy. I always used to avoid this guy. He used to just walk past you, as you just get past it, he'll grab you by the throat and he'll just throttle you till you pass out, that type of thing. And I mean, that's horrible. That's a horrible feeling, but yeah, I mean, we had to cope with it. We had to survive. We had to do all these other things, and you can't just go and tell. You can't just go and tell the what you call it, the father of the house or the mother of the house, or there was a social worker that was living on the premises. You can't just go and sort of go and tell them, oh, so and so has done this and this to me, because you'll pay the price. We've had at showers with rows and rows of basins. You will be waken up 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then it's your turn to go and show off a bit of a fight inside the showers as well, because I'll close the door from the inside and they have their buddies there, and whoever your opponent might be your best friend, and then it was a question of, well, you hit him or he hits you, or they will hit both of you, and that's how the fight would start.
Now we know each other, Dries. We've been speaking many, many hours because of this program. I tend to make friends with people. You'll be surprised, many people, when they write to me, it's always like, we don't want to bother you. You're not bothering me. Let me say that right. You're not bothering me. It keeps me on the ground. I like to hear from all of you. And I like to hear the human element in a story as well. Now, I also understand in those days, and probably today as well, the orphanage children would be sent out on genuine farms, on holidays, where they could work with a farmer. I'm not sure if you were paid or not. I wouldn't call it a form of slavery. But did you go on such trips to farms?
Yes, Chris. What happened, Chris, is the children's home or the orphanage was run also partly. A lot of funding comes from the government. I could imagine. I mean, I was too small and to get involved with all, but it was very church driven. And what then happens, Chris, if it's school holiday and you don't have family or parents to go to, or that's interested, or because of your age, people don't particularly, they like a match for their kids if it's a family that would like to bring in another. So what you then do is you don't apply, but you basically put your hand up that you're interested in to go to a different family for the school holidays, and they would give a few indicators, age so and so, interested in so and so, in farming life or in those sorts of things, and that's how you then get either selected, whether there was a photo involved. Because I don't know, we used to joke about it, but we used to say we used to be auctioned out like animals, but that's kids, you get, and especially being Afrikaans kids, and we don't know any better. Course, and my first posting was actually a sad one, course, where the hostel father basically mentioned that if we are a little bit out of hand, there's a law of rule that says the hosting family could take a little bit of the law in their own hands and punish, and it was very, very sad. I can't remember the girl's name. She was older than me, and the long and the short of it is, of course, I honestly I enjoyed it there. I played with his son. I was good mate. I was always playful, and you go for the things for enjoyment. But I think there was something sinister behind either either him or I don't know whether his wife was involved with it, or because I was only a little boy back then. But I was severely punished for being. I left my jersey. I left it on the lawn in the front there, and when he got back from work, my jersey was still laying there, and it was time to have a bath. And I got called into his little office, whatever. And I was really beaten up, because I was beaten up to the point of where you cry, you're a kid, you cry, it's painful and it's hurtful. But I don't know if he planned this beforehand, how he must have masterminded something. But then sadly, because he took advantage of the situation, and there was a fair bit of with me laying there, locked door, crying, threats, I'm going to beat you up again if you look up, or if you turn around, or if you do this or you do that. So I was basically pushed in the corner there. And and it wasn't with a belt or anything like that. It was with a fist, and a young kid. Yes, I mean, I know a little bit about fighting now because of the gladiator scenes, but and then there was some serious sexual harassment going on there, because and I can't even remember her name. I don't even know. I don't even know if she's still alive. I don't even know. You're too small and you're too little to think about it. Anyway, the long and the short of it, that's what happened. And then also, after that, I sort of had a little bit of a resistance, and it went quiet for a while. And then I decided, I can't be staying there, holiday in and holiday out, holiday in and holiday out, go to school. And so I put my hand up again, and I end up going to a family which visit their family on a farm in Zeerust. Was back then, I think it still is called the Maize Triangle, Millie Driehoek, Maize Triangle. And there I really fell in love with the tractors. I fell in love with growing food, see where the food is coming from. And that kickstarted a lot of my holidays, because I went there every school holiday till my last holiday in when I finished school in matric or standard 10 back then. And however, I started having a bit of a downturn towards the end of my school term for that year, because sadly I lost my little brother that I told in the beginning, that was a little baby then when we were sent to the orphanage. My little brother was killed in a bus, the children's home's bus. And that has put me in a very, very, very bad spot. My schoolwork fallen behind. I was not allowed to. I was actually called in, and by the house father, and told that I'm not supposed to make any scenes, and I wasn't given a chance to grieve. I wasn't given any. There was no emotional support, nothing. And then I can recall we were taken to the Johannesburg hospital, where he was laying in a coma, and my father was there as well, of course. And sadly, like I say, the half jacks were working, and then the doctors start talking about organ donation, and what do I know? You've just been through this, and they now start about body parts, and that didn't went well either, course. And then what hit me very, very hard at that stage as well is he died the next day, and I had to go with my dad again. We went back to the children's home, and the next day my dad arrived there. How he got there, because I simply don't know. But he was clearly as drunk as a skunk, you know, and I had to drive the car then, and because he had to go and identify the body at the morgue, and obviously the people could see, so I had to do it with him, and it was, I can't describe it, you know. It's just uh, dealing with the sad part of it, identifying my little brother, but also had to deal with my father in that sort of state of mind, because he obviously clearly thought that the alcohol is going to solve the problem, and it's very sad, was very sad. Anyway.
Well, I can tell you as a lawyer and as a former policeman, not that I'm practicing law anymore, it is sad that these people with evil intentions always goes after the vulnerable children. So they target these orphanages. And they often do it husband and wife together. Whether the wife is being beaten in the background, I don't know. I don't care. What I do know is this type of nonsense must end. Now I have to ask you, once you're 18 years old, even if it's in August or in June, and they kick you out of the orphanage, you still have to finish school. What the hell do you do?
Chris, yes, they give exactly right. You're 100% right. They hold a little, like a little. Of course, there's other kids that's leaving as well, boys and girls, and they have what they call like a little you know, a sit-in with you know, a little bit of food to eat, and then they basically it's basically like a farewell, just a very tiny farewell ceremony, you know, to officially say goodbye, you know. And you're right, you have to leave. You can't stay any longer. That's it. So yes, you get 100% right. You get a bit of clothes, you know, to see you through. You get a little bit of cash. I can't remember. It wasn't a lot of money, you know. It was just something that helps you out. And then obviously I already received my call-up papers for the military, and I was at a technical school, so it makes sense that I can only think that the government's liaise with the schools, and they know that you're in a technical school, and so I was basically given the call-up papers to report to TDK, Technische Dienstkorps, Technical Center. I'm not 100%.
Technical Service Corps, I suppose.
That's it. Yeah. In obviously, and then there was just a short period of time, obviously from December to January, like where you have to just find yourself a little bit of a place to stay. At that stage, not really a place to go. I decided to book myself into the back then the railways had like a little like a hostel where you could stay, and I basically stayed there till I could actually move into the army. And it was back then still at the old showgrounds in Johannesburg. And so that's transitioning from that sort of life into the military or the army life. And you know, I had good hopes, and I can explain a little bit of that.
Now I can see, unlike me, Dries, his real name is Andries actually, but we call each other, I call him Dries. You've got a lot of hair on your head. unlike some of us, you know. So I have to ask you, did you arrive at the army with a bit of long hair?
Yes, Koos.
I thought so.
Yes, yes.
What did they do to your hair?
Yes, Koos. It's the old saying, you know. We all were basically a bit of a takara, you know. Like I say, money was scarce. There was no way I was going to cut my hair, and then it's, you know, everybody, you know, you start sort of getting a bit of feel. Oh, they're going to cut your hair, bald kop, or what's it, obscure kop, or what was it called, short back and sides anyway. So yeah, yeah, you just you know, go with the flow, because they send you the list of all the stuff that you're going to need to actually go into the army. And you know, I can maybe just mention this as well. My school sweetheart, she was with me that day to say goodbye, you know. And I remember the well, now I know it's corporal, but you know, you know, you don't know all these dudes, you know, they're standing around there with all this sort of macho attitude, if I could, you know. And then in the background you see some of the guys in their civic clothes already. You know, you got to pack out everything, you know, you got to sort of, you know. And yeah, and I recall approaching this dude, you know. I'm here now to serve my country sort of approach, you know, trying to be as polite as possible, if you know what I mean. And I've already give my school sweetheart like a little kiss goodbye and that. And this guy looked at me like, and he blown up like one of those Michelin men, you know. And he said to me, "Who's that? Wie's dat?" And I said, it's my girlfriend, you know. And he says to me, "Nou fucking draai jy fucking om en jy gaan fucking groet haar ordentlik." Jy weet. So so yeah, I just chucked my bag down, you know, my civic kit, and run and yeah, and not knowingly that was probably one of my best goodbye kisses I've ever received from her, because in my military I received, and I know what's his name, Pete Colfoot spoke about you know, when you receive your Dear Johnny letter. And I had 40 days left, course, and I received my dear Johnny letter on top of all that. But that's a story for another day. And yeah, so that was it. I was in, and yeah, the dreaded haircut, you know, the what's it called, the Samel ride, or the Bedford ride from the station, the rough ride, or whatever you want to call it. Roofie ride's the word. The Roofie ride was like full on, you know. And yeah, and yeah, that was my arrival at Technische Dienstkorps as a Tiffy.
Well, just to jump into the future now. But let me say that I think that Sergeant Major, whoever told you to go and kiss your girlfriend, he was actually trying to be kind. We will give him the benefit of the doubt, even if his language was a bit strange. But you have a son now. You have two sons actually in Australia, and one of them served in the Australian Army in Afghanistan. So I have to ask you, Dries, how did you feel saying goodbye as a father now?
That was bad. You know, you do all these sacrifices when you apply to immigrate to Australia. It changed a little bit, but it's and a lot of people will tell you if you immigrate permanently, it's not an easy task, you know, and it's financially it's not cheap, you know. You got to pay lawyer fees, you got to pay this, you got to pay that, and your vision is to do the best for your kids. Really, I sort of knew that there's going to be sacrifices to be made, you know, and I knew uh, I'm going to sort of have a hard time, but my hopes and my prayers was to give my kids a good future, something that they can always go back onto. You know, yes, they have to learn and speak English now, and it wasn't an easy move either. But as a father, I did the best I can. You know, you pay all the fees, and you arrive here, and you sort of do the best you possibly can. What then happened was, Chris, is after school and while the kids is in school, they sort of get a feel as well, because there's no compulsory military service here. They sort of get a feel of the interests of the kids, you know, by giving them a variety of things to do with their hands and that. So with George, it was the case of him joining uh, uh, a company that he can, because the school help you with it as well. They a company where he can learn hand skills, and he decided to become a tool maker. And a tool maker is actually, I'm not sure if you know, Chris, but a tool maker is actually a very sought after trade, you know, and he did very well, you know. He done his 4 years training. And I remember, you know, and he slowly started to become a bit of a rebel, you know, a bit of that sort of Aussie attitude, you know, and it goes a little bit against our culture a little bit, you know. And I made it sure that there's going to be no graffiti and all these gangs, and, you know, there's going to be none of that, you know. They're going to show respect, you know, and that sort of thing. So it was the little bit that I've learned in the children's home, I sort of, you know, try to mold it a little bit, and you know, make sure that it's not going to be all in vain immigrating here. And I remember it was a Friday afternoon course, and you know, back then, me and Ems, we bought we had to buy an extra washing machine, because as a toolmaker you work a lot on the lathes and the milling machines and the CNC machines, and they use that oil that turns like milk when you mix it with water, and that stuff stink. It's a tell you can't wash your clothes with those overalls, if you know what I mean. And where he worked, they didn't wash his overalls, so we had to buy a special washing machine. Anyway, with all those memories, he said to me just like that. He said, "Dad, I'm not gonna." He finished his trade, and I'm not gonna pursue my trade any further. I've decided I'm going to join the Australian Army. And yeah, I think it was a week later, we took him in the city, and he was sworn in, and same thing. He was giving a food parcel, and we said goodbye, and he was taken to the airport, and they were flown to Kapuka. Kapuka is one of the military bases, as you know, in Australia. And yeah, and that was his beginning of the military, with all the warnings, all the uh, you know, the cautions that I tried to explain to him, that you know, he was still determined. We went to his phasing out parade. Even then, you know, I had some good words with him. And then he done some demolition courses as well in Sydney with the army. And then he got sent to Darwin. It's a huge military base there in Darwin. We went to visit him a few times there. And from there, he was sent to Afghanistan.
Well, I know he came back, and he's happy today, and so is the other son. We thank God for that. But if I can take you back, when was this, 1980, 81 about, when you got drafted into the South African Army in the technical corps?
Yes, Chris. Yeah, Yes, course, it was 1981, January 1981, 82. So I was 81, 82 intake, if you want to call it that way. And yeah, it was a difficult time for me because, like I said, I try to tell it as a bit of a story, and some of the little nuggets that I drop down is to try and blend it in as but why did I lose a few marbles along the way, type of thing, and why did things get so difficult in my life? And like I say, the discipline wasn't really bothering me. It was more sort of, the military type of abuse, the military type of approach. Of course, we all individuals, and we all wire differently. I think the hurt. There was enough hurt in my life already, as into the military. The op for PT and that sort of thing wasn't really uh, uh, that bad for me. I was relatively fit. I was not non-smoker. I could run the 2,4. I was relatively. I'm still is skinny, but I could run with the R1, my 2,4. With flying colors, and I think I did well in my basic training course. But there's a military side, and I'm not having a whinge, or there's a side in the military that I didn't enjoy, because I really, and if I may say, it's caused a lot of hurt in my life, and it's caused a lot of personal injuries that I'm still battling with, funny enough. And I'll give you one example, because you do all this training, which is fine. I mean, they hone you as a soldier, they hone you as a Tiffy. So it's a combination of the two. Not as intense as an infantry, or as a gunner, or as a reconnaissance. But it's almost like a multi-role. If expected from you, you could easily back up some of your friends in a sort of a military conflict, because they've learned some of the basic things. They teach you how to shoot. And some days when you do your I'll never forget it, because when they do all these lectures about certain topics, and you tired. And there was this sergeant, I still can't, I can't get over it. It's not a matter of build your own bridge and get over it. The hurt and the damage that was done, it's at the time, it's a big joke. You had one of these little, those little indicators. They sit on the trucks. If you want to go into a narrow space with a truck, he had one of them, and that was his toy. That was his, and then he walked between us guys now that sits there. And as soon as you try to nod off a little bit, because you're tired, you're nodding off because you're tired. This guy would, and he would jump between the guys and fall over some of the guys to get to you. And he will hit you with this antenna, snorkel, knopkiri, whatever you want to call it, on the head. Because, and I'll tell you, it's one of the most painful and rude awakening you can ever imagine. We can laugh about it now. They all laughed about it, and he probably creamed his pants, if you know what I mean, by doing it. And he's doing it all day long. He's jumping between it, and that has left a deep scar in my life. And then I was. One day I was bashed and smashed by a corporal, which had a cask on. Still today, I don't know why. It didn't go down well with me, because like I said to you, I already know about abuse from childhood days and all those sorts of things. Till today, I don't know what that had anything to do with military. you know, if even if that sergeant had waken me up with a glass of water, and I know it's the army, but you know, you're sleepy, and rather teach me something valuable in the military, if you know, if you know the message that I'm trying, instead of doing that, I mean, that's not on. That's definitely not on. I didn't appreciate it. I didn't appreciate the corporal that hit me with the cask. You know, and it wasn't just a little bit of a rough and tumble. It was sort of a serious effect and a bit of a show off to use me as an example to the other troops as well, or to my fellow troops. You know, I was in Delta Escadron, and we were close to the mess hall. You know, so when the other guys came in, you know, there's always a bit of a, you know, a lot of bees around the honeypot. You know, so there's a lot of eyes, and whether he sort of laid it on a little bit more than what it was, but but that was it, Chris. But I also, just on a funny note, want to tell you, you know, the corporal used to show you like this, you know, and then you run, okay. And I don't know, I pushed my luck. I don't know. Yeah, I did pay a daily price, but that was now a military price. That was now something that I asked for, and that's what I got. And there was a big rock on the out parade ground, a big rock. I think it's still there. Anyway, so, you know, you go around the rock and then back and on and on and on and on as you go, and Gary Pass and all that. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, the corporal said something, and I was the closest to him as we run around and then fall in line, and he said something about, what does the rock have to say? You know, and me, cheeky, I said to him, Corporal, the rock's calling you. And I shouldn't have done that, mate. I paid dearly for it.
Yeah, I have sympathy, Dries. You know, these type of things should not happen. Sadly, did happen. I've spoken to many people here who said to me that they felt a bit mistreated at times. I don't think it was part of a doctrine, but it certainly happened, and it should not have happened. And we should mention this. I mean, there are, I believe, other people like you who will say the same, that they felt that there were a bit of sadistic things going on, which was beyond what is, strictly speaking, necessary. Yeah. Now, on a lighter note, I was at a place called Modular. Now, any policeman listening here will know the word Modular. It's like a huge farm. I don't know if it still exists, but that's where you do your bush training as well as your almost a riot course. But the big one for the police was the counterinsurgency one. Takes 6 weeks. According to the guys who were in the army as well, they say it's better than the army's one. I'm not going to get into that argument. That's what they said. Yeah. And it's quite thorough. And of course, you're wearing your camouflage dress and you feel like a real man, you know. And by that time, you're allowed to have a snort, like a nice moustache. Very much according to the police regulations. I have to say that too. And being in the police, I think in the army as well, every day starts with a church parade, with a prayer parade. And every Sunday you are marched right into church. And may I say, our lance sergeants were the same as the corporals in the army, and they would tell you what a mother F you are until you're right in that church, and then they leave you alone. And then they would actually stand there looking at who's sleeping or who's not singing loudly enough or who's like playing a fool. And let me tell you, when you step outside God's house, all hell breaks loose for you. But on this specific day, we took a job down to the church. It was quite far away. And as we're running, I say to the warrant officer, he's quite an older guy. I said, sir, are you a man who believes in the Bible? And he says, yes, of course. He's like an ouderling, you know, he's like a church elder. And I say, well, then why don't you read Proverbs 28 verse 1? And he says, why don't you tell me what stands there? And I say, slegs die goddelose sal hardloop sonder om gejaag te word. I'm not too sure how to translate. Only the godless people will run without being chased. Man, that's where he decided he will chase me with his Land Cruiser, with me with the R1 above my head running at front, and he's trying to hit me with this damn Land Cruiser of his. But I'm not a good runner. Look, when I was in a police law school, they even brought, I think, the top brass out to see me run. Because it's really uncoordinated. I'm like totally like that guy you see who has got 2 left feet. Well, I've got 3 of them. You know, and one is standing out like this too, and it's just a mess up. So I understand where you come from. But I'm interested to knowing the training of a Tiffy. So you would start out as a basic training like anybody else. You're a soldier first and foremost. And thereafter, what do they do with you? Do they ask you, do you want to be a mechanic or do you want to be a whatever?
Yes, Chris, that's actually a very good question, Chris, because, you know, I don't know exactly how they separate us, who goes where. There is a little bit of a, you know, where you show a bit of interest, and I think then there is a and please, I'm not saying this was the rule. I'm not saying this is exactly how it worked. As we progress with our legacy into the military, I'll explain to you why I'm saying what I'm about to say. Of things that's happened to me. I only speak to myself, and I'm only telling it so that, like you say, there is other Tiffys, and there is other Tiffys that's had it worse than me. There's other Tiffys that's had things that, and like you said, you know, speak up. Maybe it makes you feel better. But I personally think, was that it's got a lot to do with your interest, but it's also got to do with whether you're a likable person or whether you're a person that they would allow you into their lair, you know, into their little world, you know, if you a troublemaker or whatever you might end up. And like I say, yes, I was given the opportunity to train as a Land Rover, Gary, then Samel 20, then Samel 50, Samel 100, and you progress. Now, like I say, being scarred and all that, you lose a little bit of your enthusiasm and a little bit of, you know, because a part of our training as well, there's the permanent force guys that they go to technical college, they go to, you know, you see them every day. They depart in a nice, beautiful, shiny Samel to college to go and study. They're the ones that's actually allowed to study the real, the inner workings of you know, the military vehicles, the military equipment, and all those. You know, ours is just a very sort of a basic training. And I think the army sort of cashed in on the fact that some of us actually done a trade. So when you receive this training and you go and work, whether you go and work in Oshikati or Oshivelo or one of those posts, when you get your in the second phase, you've already got training about the inner workings of diesels and the engines and the gearboxes from your apprenticeship, which they cashed in, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But the point that I want to make here is that, I mean, if you take the corporals, I mean, take the PTI for instance. He for the 2 years that he's been there, he was a PTI, but yet he was still a Tiffy. He was trained basic. He became a PTI, and there was no way in the world that they would call him up in a to go, i.e., for instance, to Oshivallo to go and work on the rattles, if you know what I mean, because he's a PTI, he knows nothing about the rattles. And as you know, Oshivallo is not far from 61 Mach, if you know what I mean. So a lot of us benefit the army in a nice way, but a lot of it, I don't know. I don't even think that a lot of them has actually followed the trend. So I think that selection period, I know it doesn't matter anymore, but I think that selection thing was a little bit of a farce, a little bit of a booty type of thing, because I worked in the maintenance workshop as well. We still worked on old Fusspater that should have been scrapped, so the ones with the petrol engines in, the guys used to drive around in Pretoria and then they turn the ignition off and hit the throttle and then they turn it back on and boom, and this big bang and the silencer would explode. That was useless to work on those vehicles because they belong in a museum. But you had to do what the army tells you to do. I would have rather appreciated if they could hone the skills more into what I'm about to tell you with my later life in the military.
I had an interesting conversation with the US officer. He is a senior officer, general rank. Not full general, but close enough. And he looked down upon the national service type of people. According to him, it should be professional army type of story. And I said to him, sir, in the first place, where will your reserves come from? Because if you take a place like Russia, I think they still have a national service. They have a huge reserve in manpower. And then the army do score. Because what happens is they get the doctors for free, they get the engineers for free, they get the mechanics like you for free. It's quite easy to train an infantryman. And now I'm quoting an Israeli officer. It's easy to take a few guys and to learn them the basic skills. It's a damn different story when you're trying to do the technical side, like on the Navy or in the Air Force. And then if you look at South Africa, at the Army, in those days and probably today as well, armor, and armor. So what they were very, very good at was to attack. They have these armor frosts. They appear from nowhere. They overrun whatever they need to overrun. They've got their own infantry, their own mobile artillery, everything with them. They're like a self-contained unit. They destroy what they came to destroy and they bugger off. They never stay. So I can believe that the mechanics were very, very valuable to them. And then you would think, of course, these people being valuable should be treated very well. But of course, that's not always the case, is it? But now I need to ask you, does it matter to you as a mechanic whether you work on a diesel, or you work on a petrol, gasoline type of vehicle? Do you have a preference?
No, because my background and my training, like I said, started in basics of the military, but part of my decisions to make when I joined the South African Railways for an apprenticeship was part of the reason was mainly to get that real, genuine, high quality apprenticeship, as in, they have a lot of resources, they have a lot of skilled people already, they have a lot of different vehicles. And the apprenticeship that I took up was basically to involve petrol and diesel and you name it. So our training, it was basically called, the depot was called CPRD, Central plant repair depot, and I can promise you, there you work on basically anything, or you work, but you train and learn on basically anything and everything that can make a noise, or that has an engine, or and you learn basics of a lot of other things as well, air tools, things that's involved with these machinery. It's not always just about the machinery. You do basic lathe machining training. You do extensive welding training, because that's part of your trade when you go to Olifantsfontein for your trade test. You get tested on these things, and then you go through a whole lot of different phases. So that part of it is very interesting, and a lot of our skills also is you listen, you look, you sort of resolve the problem by looking and seeing what is it telling you, what is it feeding back into you. Does the engine have a misfire in it? Is it overheating? So if it's overheating, you've got a whole row of things. Why is it overheating? Or another example, and I'll talk about it later on in some of my military experiences as well, with the rattles and the biffles and you name it, what they've thrown at us, is that is it starving from fuel, lack of power. So there's a two-way communication, and that's one thing I can say of whoever trained the drivers and the military personnel that operates these vehicles. I'll give a very good thumbs up for them, because those guys were very good. They know how to communicate to you in saying, my rattle is doing this and this and this, or the biffle is doing this and this and this. And I've got a lot of stories that I can tell you about how passionate some of them were in getting their vehicle going. So that part of the military I've actually liked, and I've actually enjoyed interacting with them and how they relay the information to you. But to me, there was no there's no preference working one day on a lawnmower and the next day working on a Caterpillar grader, for instance. There was real no preference. And the next day you might be working on a Ford Cortina bakkie, if you know what I mean. It was no, some are easier to work on, some you obviously have a bit more experience on. I'll give you an example. Like the railway had the railway police actually had these little trains. There was like a little armored train that could ride on the tracks, and they actually had a Ford 1600 Cortina engine in the little crossflow engine with a automatic gearbox, and they had two radiators in with a jack in the middle. So if they go this way and they want to come back, they jack it up, turn it around, and it goes the other way, so that was part of our trade. Petrol, obviously, as you know, back then wasn't so purified, so it stinks. Diesel stink, and later on in our conversation, we used to wash our hands with petrol and diesel because there was no soap, and sand. So you do what you have to do, and some of the things is, especially in the military, it's not things that you can do by the book. There's no manual. Benel didn't write a manual for each Tiffy to take with him under his arm, and say, this is how you fix the rattle, and that brings me back to what I've said in the beginning. We used to march past the rattle shop and the tank shop, and it was like sort of a bit of a secluded area, what are you looking at in here, and you think to your mind, it would be nice if you could spend 2-3 weeks there learning about the rattle, because it wasn't really about attitude. It was more like about, what if I get called up one day and I have to work on a rattle? And in my case, it did happen, but I was never ever trained by the military to fix rattles. That was all a passion in myself and the skills that I've learned in my trade.
Are you people aware of the fact that you would be going to the border at some stage?
Yes. Yes, Chris, I was given the opportunity. However, like and that's why I mentioned it to you in the beginning as well, so that people can understand and people can sort of make up a bit of a picture of. In my case, I'm not saying it's with everybody, but in my basic training as well, I'll never forget it. Course, my corporal's name was Corporal van Eden, and they, in my basic training, they received a call from my mom, and that my dad was in a very, very terrible state. Again, it was the half-jack issues, and I was called in and questioned. My corporal at that stage didn't feel or didn't think there was any need for me to go home at that stage to go and help resolve the matter. I was given, I think a week later, I was given a day or two. That was the time when it was so heavily snowed. It's the first time it snowed in Johannesburg. I don't know if you can remember. So I remember on the on the expressway, the highway. I can remember all the snow, and yeah, and just briefly, yeah, when I got there, I sorted out a little bit of the mess, and when my father, when he was alive, bless his soul, I packed his bag and to take him to the AA, and he looked at the snow like this, and he was already, and he said, "That's not going to happen." So yeah.
I'm trying to I'm trying to understand how the training works for the Tiffies. You do your basics. Then they draft you into workshops, I suppose, where you practically work on vehicles, anything which comes along. And I suppose you have like a corporal or a sergeant instructor who can show you around. Because even though you people came from a technical school and you're really handy with your hands, there might have been things you just didn't know. But then if you want to get hold of spare parts, let's say you have to service this Cortina Bakkie you're talking about. The army would supply you with spark plugs and fuel filters and those things.
Yeah, yes, Chris. You would get your training, and that's where they'll teach you about. Let's take, for instance, the SAML. They'll teach you about the SAML engine, the Mageres DSL. They'll teach you the very basics of it. There was no training as in how to remove the engine or how to diagnose the engine, for that matter, with specialized tools. Those are things that we've learned in our apprenticeship later on in years and later on life. Because as you know, when you work with a big corporation, you're doing training courses, and at that stage we were just giving basic training. It's a SAML engine, it's air cooled, this and this is the amount of power it can develop. They'll take us to the bush and show us the four-wheel drive capabilities of it. And I can remember as well where the sergeant was telling us that he's going to put all of us, I can't remember exactly how many we were, maybe 20 guys on the back of a SAML 20 and go up a hill, like a really steep hill. Obviously had it in all the right gears. He would turn the engine off, so the vehicle would just sit there. All right. And then he'll just hit the starter button. So the vehicle would go boop, 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 and it starts and it will take off, without hitting the clutch because it's already in gear. Small little demonstrations like that. But there was no real in-depth training for us as to, specializing in a SAML 20, specializing in a SAML 50, specializing in a SAML 100, specializing in a Ratel. The Ratel used to train a few Tiffies just on the Ratel, but in reality and in real life, when you get called up, You know, you get called up by a number, or you get called up when it's your time, you know. Oh, Andries hasn't done a camp this year, you know, or, you know, they short on call up numbers. So it would be silly to have called up the PTI. You know, I mean, what benefit is he going to be? So I don't know how that selection worked, but there was no way that everybody was trained equally on all the vehicles that the military possessed. Like, for instance, for us going to Denel, and they show us how it's manufactured, so you can work out a pattern, what sits where. You know, I mean, the first time that I worked on a rattle, I didn't even know where the batteries sit on the rattle, if you know what I mean. I had to figure it out myself and communicate with the driver or the operator, if you know what I mean. But you're not going to stand there in the middle of Oshikati and so, well, I don't know how to, you know, you're there. You got to help these dudes out. You got to make it work. You got to make it for the military. You got to make it for yourself. You got to make it for him. It's a very difficult question. It's not easy for me to explain. There could be other people that could explain it differently, but that's how I develop my skills in the military. As in, I'll give you another example. In '83, I was in Oshikati course, and there we just worked mainly on ensembles and biffles. That's it. Day in and day out, we would pull engines and gearboxes and just change them day in and day out, and you know, and small repairs, you know, just small little nitty gritty things. A radiator here, radiator there, you know, and those sorts of type of work. But it's a shame that we weren't also given the luxury like some of the permanent force members, because that's how I thought how it worked. You know, they would go and they would learn the inners of the rattle, and then when 61 Mac go on an ops, they're the ones that should have been there with their specialist training and specialist tools. In my case, it wasn't that, because I learned on the fly. I tapped into my skills that I've learned in my apprentice. Spare parts, yeah, there is in the army bases, in the civilian part of the army, there's spare chasers. So they would pick up the various spare parts as you need it for various vehicles, or they would stock it in their stores, of course. On the borders, on the different bases, I've been to Inanna, Oshikati, Ondangwa, Oshivelo. The stores will have a certain amount of spare parts there. And if they don't have it, they would either get it from Grootfontein, or one of them. The Grootfontein was like the biggest supplier of spare parts. That's where a majority of the spare parts would come from the States to there, and then it gets distributed. But as we go along in my further in my military career, or I don't like to call it camp, so it was no camp for me, but in our what's it called, the civilian Burgermacht, you know, Citizens Force, that's right.
Which is after you completed your national service for 2 years, you get allocated into a citizen regiment or something, and then they call you up. I mean, the paper arrive, and you have to get your uniform out. Hopefully you still fit in it. And then your army life starts again for a few months. It must be disrupting to do it like that. But if you ended up on the border during your national service, or that came up later when they needed more mechanics up north?
Yes, of course. I was after. I'll put it after your 2-year basic training and whatever you've done in those 2 years. A lot of guys, like I said, I volunteered to go and do the rest of my 2 years after the basics. I volunteered to actually go to the border. So then you spend the rest of your 2 years on wherever they send you, Oshikati or one of those, you know, Katima Mululu, Buffalo, Rundu, all those places. And then you just work basically on whatever is there to be worked on or to be repaired on, whether it's the local forklift or the local, each base used to have a local, either a little galley or something, the beach of everybody just drive this thing, no one checks the oil or nothing. Everybody just jumps in, turn the key, and away they go. And and they do exist. So, like I said, with the half jack saga, I was declined that part, so I couldn't volunteer to go to Katima Mululu or one of those bases because of the fear of they might need me. And so I was basically I was just told it's maybe better for you if you just stay. So I stayed the rest of my 2 years in Pretoria at the Tiffy base there, and we worked in the vehicles there. And yeah, I had a lot of friends there, and we had a lot of things on the go. And you're right, after that, you still have your commitment to go and do. And I was given I don't know what the right word is, because I was allocated to 31 field workshop in Alberton. That's or 72 Mod Brigade. That was in Alberton, and it was the old Peugeot factory. They used to manufacture the Peugeots there. And that was turned into a military base. And that was, you report there, and then you get sent out. You got no idea where you're going. You got no idea what's going to happen to you. You get issued with the things that's too small for you, or the things that you don't have. You go and get at the, what's it called, the KM store.
Yeah, but master, kwartiermeester, KM.
Correct. So yeah, and and so you have to swap. If your browns is too small for you, if you get too fat or too thin, you're going to swap your browns around, and and then you get taken to with military samuels to Waterkloof, and you jump the Flossie, and away you go. And I can recall also, course, in 85 I was called up, and I had the back then it makes you feel a little bit excited, if so there is a little bit of excitement, a little bit about it as well. So I was called in as the voorspan, so you 3 or 4 guys that goes with some higher ranking guys ahead of the pack, and you sort of not set up the base. Oshivalo was there already, but you sort of get things a little bit organized, and there in 85 in Oshivalo, it was just rattles. We just worked on rattles day in and day out. Rattles, so yeah.
How reliable is these rattles mechanically?
Chris, my experience with them, they were actually true to the label. I would say they were true to the label. I mean, the Badger is really a tough little, if you look at National Geographic, the Mambas and what's her name, they take them on head on, the puff adder, they challenge them, and that's how yes, you're right. The 23ZU, that Russian anti-aircraft thing, could shoot right through an RPG. Yes, it wasn't, but that wasn't its purpose. But I've developed a lot of respect for the rifle, as in, the abuse that it technically received. It was sort of a Rolls Royce of the jungle type of thing. It's a MAN chassis that's been glorified by Donnell. You know, that 6-cylinder bushing engine, when you look at it from the top, you know, it doesn't look like much, but, you know, had a very good transmission in, you know. I know there's rumors that said the Russian tanks always used to try and hit them from underneath because that's where their soft spot is and blah, blah, blah. But honestly, Koos, without anybody keeping, you know, with your car, you got like a service book, or if your service shop, they'll send you an email and say your car's now due for a service. You know, no one kept that sort of things for the rattles or the biffles, you know, and it's got a different driver every third, fourth day or third, fourth, and they just hammer them, you know. And I've got a lot of respect for them. I can't say bad things about them, because they drive nice, as you know. You know, it feels a little bit sort of cramped in there, you know, and the windows a bit, you know, you know, you're almost like a racehorse, you know, you can't really, you know, but man, I've been in convoys in Angola, and that thing just sort of leaves us behind, man. You know, they should have technically put the rattles in the back, put the slowest vehicle in the front. And some of those drivers are pretty good, and ideally of the rattle, you sit in the middle, you sit right in the middle, and all those little twee-spoor sandpaadjies, you know, those little 2-row dirt roads, you know, you sit in the middle, so you just aim at the, you know, it's so ideal, you know. Unlike with the biffle, you know, we've had so many biffle accidents in those little paadjies, you know, people breaking their thumbs, the wheels hit the little rut, you know, on the side, spin the wheel in their hands, or even the Casper, you know. I've seen people burning I should tell it in a later stage, but I've seen the people burning the Casper clutches, like it's like the white smoke just bellows out of it when it's like what was that thing called? Visgraat, fishbone. When you fishbone, when the mix come over, you know, when they radio in, and then one goes this way, one this way, one this way, one this way. And I've seen people with that manual gearboxes, they struggle, you know, and yeah, burn clutches, and yeah. So I'm jumping around a little bit, Chris, but it's yeah. I've had a lot of respect for the rattle. It's very, very well designed. I in my heart, and I know it doesn't matter anymore. I know it's finished, it's over, but in my heart, I felt I could have done better for the rattles if I was trained better for the rattles. Yeah, I could change the engine and, you know, do some, you know, and we bounce off each other as well, if you know what I mean, Chris. So very interesting vehicle. Yeah, I'm amazed that it probably was, you know, that technology wasn't adopted in other countries and taken further, you know, as a development, because there was different models rattles as well, the Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3. I'll tell you later on the differences. I can't remember exactly. And then obviously, as you know, there was the 20 mil, there was the 90 mil, there was the officer's rattle. Inside was just those little screens that can go across with maps, and medical rattle, and the ones with the rear gunner, you know, as a rear gunner. And it's quite amazing. It's an amazing vehicle, and I only speak highly of 61 Mech. You know, those boys, they were always there. Yes, we did bleed. You know, we did. They're the heroes. We did suffer a lot of losses, but I think if the vehicle was anything different than the rattle, the losses would have been, I personally think, or the breakdowns. From a Tiffy point of view, I think we would have had more sleepless nights, you know. Repair by night and fight by day, or repair by day and fight by night used to be our motto, you know. And yeah.
Well, I know if the Casper, if its engine stops working, the power steering goes. And if the power steering goes, there's no way. I don't care how strong you are, you will not turn that steering wheel. And sometimes those vehicles cut out at the most horrible time of your life. I mean, then you just have to brake. Hope the brakes are still working. But normally, of course, we did because we were air pressure. There was enough air inside. But let us talk about a few things on the border as well. You keep on saying that you will get to it later. Now, I remember Colonel Frans Fourie, the Special Forces commander. He kept on saying that as well, and we had quite a few letters from people and bloody well get to it because they want to know about it. So I think what I can do is we have a few pictures which I'm going to put here on the screen.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
is Huka. One is Huka Ratel. It's standing there next to looks like a river or a dam or water, and you people are there in your underwear. Of course, the first question will be, why the hell are you in your underwear? And secondly, what went wrong with that Ratel?
Yeah, but I was going to quickly tell you the story about the limo before we get to the military stuff, because I want to stay with the military stuff and not go back to the limo stuff. I was quickly going to tell you the story about the limo. It's an interesting story.
Are we listening?
Chris, yeah. A part of our basic training was obviously, as you know, the guard duty, and I'll just want to sort of quickly tell you what's happened to me and my fellow comrade at the main gate at TDK as Tiffys and guards, and I just want to stop that there. A few months before that, one of our Tiffy guys was actually on the parade ground guard tower. He was actually, I can't remember the time, he was actually approached by a guy just out of the blue in the dark. And when he realized this guy's getting closer and closer under the military lights, and the guy appeared to be very sort of friendly and sort of approachable, and he kept on telling him to come down the tower, if you know what I mean. And the guy wasn't quite sure, but the guy persisted and said, no, I just want to ask him something. And the guy had fallen for the strap, poor Tiffy, and he got attacked. And he got he obviously took his R1 with the magazine and silenced the radio, and they took his boots off, shoved one of the socks in his mouth, and took his boot lace, tie him up. And he took the other lace and put it around his neck, and he tried to throttle this guy. This guy was actually very, very badly injured on the base, and the weapon disappeared. We were told about it, and no one knows exactly what happened. Was it a setup? Was it a test for us as guards to see how we would react? And we've never heard of that, but the story sticks in your mind. So now back to the guard. Here we stand, me and I mean, I only speak for myself, but I have to mention Danny, because he was part of it. Me and Danny were quite good friends. Thank you, Danny. And Danny was quite sharp with remembering, when it's our time to do guard duty. He always used to, when we marched to the guard house, the actual where our kitties and so forth, and the corporal's bed and all that, he would say, Dries and Danny, first beat at the main gate, so we don't have to stand in those towers. And he was very good at it. Well, this particular day was a Friday night, I must say, and it was Friday night. Service Street goes on. It's the guard duty and the army, and here's me and Danny at the gate, and the beat goes on, and you talk all this rubbish, and you carry on, and we used to perfected that skill where you could take the R1, and if you hit it hard on the butt, it would cycle around. You know what we do. We've been naughty boys and been bored and talk about all these things. Anyway, it was late at night. It was very close for us to go off beat. Of course, we stand at beat first. I was then by then, and we were a little bit of an omana, and we sort of made the rules and say, if you go on beat, you do both your sessions, and that's it. So when you go off, you're finished. You don't have to wake up again. Anyway, it was sort of an internal rule we made. And it was close to getting off beat, and here pulls this black limousine, Chris. And, obviously there was these posts, they can't just drive in, and the window in the back goes down, and me and Danny thinking of what's happened to this other dude in the tower, you sort of think, hey, hang on, is this R1 going to get needed tonight, or what's going to happen? So a lot of things go through your mind, so you approach the scene with caution. And the window goes down, and here was this cheeky babies in the back. They were all drunk as skunks, man. The alcohol was flowing. They were happy, and here we stand, guardy. They invite us, come on with the jaw with us, put the gun away, all those things. They try to rope us in, But the strange thing is that we couldn't see any men in there, whether they were just laying low and we're getting sucked in and getting bashed up or beaten up, or whether it was a inside job, we don't know. But it was a real McCoy limousine. Whether these cheeky babies are dressed like that to set us up, or whether they drunk, but they appear to be smashed. And then they said, no, well, if you don't want to get in, let us through the gate, we just want to go and have some fun with some dudes in there, can you imagine that? I said, no, so we do the military thing. Well, you can't get in here. It's a civilian vehicle. You guys are blah, blah, blah. And it carried on and on and on. And the whole thing went around and around and around. But it was quite a classic back then, I'm trying to tell it as good as... Anyway, cut a long story short, we didn't want to budge. We didn't want to go into the limo. We said the limo is not going through this gate, because then there'll be military action taken against them. And they tried all their tricks, bit of a show off and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You know the story. Anyway, cut the long and the short, and the one cheeky baby said, no, well, look, if you guys don't want to join us, we can't go in, have some of this, And she gave me a bottle of brandy, one of those small ones, and I checked it was all sealed and everything, and I took it. I didn't think at that moment, I didn't think much of it, and I put it in my pocket. I didn't touch it. It was sealed and everything. And so, okay, so they buy and they're carrying on, and cheers, gone is the limo. And then we go back into the guard duty, do our things, go to bed. Next morning, wake up. It's Saturday. We all had weekend pass. So on a weekend pass, obviously you can go home. And as I was going through my kitters and making all the stuff ready, here's the little bottle of brandy. So I pulled the bottle of brandy out and I said, who wants this? And there was a dude in the opkas. What's the opkas? That little jail. The military police little jail. There's a little cell there where they lock up the guys that gets arrested over weekends. And I didn't know that this guy was some sort of a druggie. You know what I mean? And he says, me. I didn't think much of it. I don't care. I wasn't that big of a drinker back then. I used to have a few beers here, there, everywhere. So I gave him the bottle, that little bottle. He scolded and just chucked the bottle in his cell. So here comes the MPs to give him his food. And they got hold of the little cap and the little bottle. Well, where did you get this from? Oh, from a guy with a big black mustache. Oh, well, there you have it. Gone, finished. So I was called up. Me and Danny, orders, Anda, and we were sentenced to 2 weeks extra guard duty. That's my limousine story.
Man, I would have been suspicious too, because there was a rumor in the police. I don't know if it's true or not. It might have happened, but they were standing at the roadblock, and this very attractive woman arrived with a fairly large chest, and then she started also something like a striptease wear for the guys. And of course, you're a young man. I mean, you're going to observe what is offered. Let me put it like that. And then as she drove away, her friend dropped 2 hand grenades between the policemen, and they had to, dive for cover, and then they shot the car out. Now that's the story. Whether it happened or not, I don't know. But like hell, I would have gotten into that car. There was also this one fellow, as a white guy working for the ANC, who were the enemy those days, and he would make a point of picking up the national servicemen who were hitchhiking back home, and he would pick him up, and he's a white guy, and he looks like a nice uncle, and he's got the national serviceman with him in the car, and that's how he smuggled weapons through all the police roadblocks. And we only found that out later. I was thinking here, internet, of ending the episode right here and let you wait until the week after before we talk about the rattle, which was standing halfway into the river or water or something. And then I thought to myself, man, that's unfair, because I really want to hear the story myself. Now, I have to say to people, if you think about the Tiffys as always being in a safe, secure base, protected by the infantry and by the Air Force and by the rattles, armor, you're totally wrong. Because whenever a vehicle broke down, or whenever these vehicles went north into Angola, of course the Tiffys had to go along. Now, Dries, you're one of those who went along. It was Operation Wepener Modular. So tell me about it. I mean, you're out of the army now. You've done your trade. You are in civilian life, and suddenly the call-up papers come.
Chris, thank you. Yes, the Operation Hooper Modular, that was 87, 88. You get, in my case, yep, you get your call-up papers. We were sent on, as I'll say, you report to your base, you get all your kit, and strange enough, R1, they issue us with an R4. I was trained with the R1 and, the round size, but because of my interest in weapons, I picked it up very quickly. And I was given a crash course with one of my fellow Tiffys at Waterkloof while we were waiting for the Flossie to get filled up with fuel and do all the checks and load our kitters and all that. And we end up in course there is no pre telling you where you're going, where you're going to end up. It's just it's almost like a Russian roulette type of approach. So in the Flossie you go, we end up at Grootfontein. I didn't even know there was an operation on the go. I had no clue. Me personally, spent so many times in bungalows and on military bases. I decided that if there's any chance for me to get out of here, I'm going to put my hand up. And as it goes, there was a sergeant. They were in those little side of the bungalow where they own little roomers, and they were sitting there, and I have to. This is part of my how I'd like to just explain it. Is they were sitting there with a few castles, and the dapper manne, and they were gooing it, and so I was called in by him, and I said, well, you interested in going with us? And I said, well, I said I would like to get out of Grootfontein, whatever the case may be. And he said to me, well, there's operation on the go, blah, blah, blah. We need some really tough, strong guys. I said, well, I don't know about the tough and the strong guys, but I want to get out of here. So put my name on the list, and yeah, so my name was put on the list, and yeah, the next moment there was five Wittungster, which is the military version of the recovery. I know there's the bigger one, the bullpat, but if you guys can recall, I said we weren't trained for this, but here's the five Wittungster standing there waiting for us, ready to be saddled. Anyway, kit is in, and sadly for the sergeant, he didn't even make us go through the vehicles, as all of you guys know, and especially the real recovery boys. I'm not stealing you guys' thunder here, but the first thing that we realized that's missing was the Wittungster used to have a little diesel stove that you can cook food on with, I think, 3 or 4 stainless pots and pans. That was the first thing we realized is gone. And that was just a sort of a check we done because of getting them ready. We just done the basics, check the wheel, tire pressures, make sure we've got all our the blocks and the the winching gear and the recovery gear that we need, chains and all those. So we picked that up immediately because, hey, you got to cook food, and me being just a Tiffy and not even recovery picked that up. Anyway, long story short, we all filled up and away we go on our way from, we had to report to Rundu. So yes, off we go with the 5 Wittungs to on our way to Rundu. Halfway between Rundu and Grootfontein, the first vehicle. So we had a small, like our own little sort of convoy at that stage, and halfway between Rundu and Grootfontein, the first vehicle pulled over, and all of us pulled over, and here jumps out this guy that he's probably had a few of the good stuff with the sergeant, and he jumped out and he says, "Oh, boys, we need to pull over into the sand. The tires can't handle the bitumen heat, and they need to rest a little bit, and they're going to explode," and blah, blah, blah. He carried on like a little bit of a pork choppy there, and he obviously tried to win himself a bit of accolades. And me been telling you my story from childhood days, I just sort of pulled back like a little turtle into my own skin, and I just stood back and I just listened and just watched this. And funny enough, I was a well, it was not funny, but I was a lance corporal, and this sergeant said, "This guy knows a lot, blah, blah, blah." He carried on like a pork chop, and he said, "Do you mind sparing one of your lance corporal, the sleeve thing, rank thing, with this guy? I'm now making him a boss corporal." And I thought, wow, what's going on? I never heard of this before. Anyway, long story short, no problem, mate. Here you go. Crayfield. Anyway, so after whatever, tires is now cooled down, away we go to Rundu. Report in there to Rundu. The sergeant, he's now the main man there. He does all the things for us, and then he came back and he said, "Well, for starters, there's a rattle that needs a new engine." Oh, well, cool. That's me. So I mean, and then there was another guy. Me and him didn't get on well either. But funny enough, we changed just 2 of us. We changed the engine without a lot of communication. We didn't. There was friction there from the word go till we actually fired it up. I had to do all the checks, the pre-checks and the after installation checks. He was so up himself. He just when I turned the key and I said, "Oh, let's go for a bit of a ride, bit of the back roads there at Rundu," make sure all the vital signs is correct and the pressures and all that. Just basic things to make sure we've done the right thing. No leaks, no, this, because obviously this vehicle is going into a combat zone, and he disappeared. I've never seen him again. He disappeared. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, before we even started, we realized, hang on, we haven't got the 22mm socket. It's like a long T-bar that you go down with the to remove the bolts that actually holds the rattle engine, the bushing engine in place. Now, if and when some of the other Tiffys comes up that's more specializing in rattles, or that's want to tell their part of the story, because the rattle was very well designed in the sense as well that a lot of the fittings and the hydraulic stuff and the wiring was all couplings. So it was meant to be replaced easily and quickly. You could easily change that engine within a few hours if you have 4 or 6 people not standing in each other's way with the right tools. All right. So we made our own 22 socket. We didn't have all the right tools, funny enough, but we made a plan. All right. Boer maak 'n plan. And I distanced myself from this guy. He worked on that side and I worked on this side, out with the engine. And now that particular model rattle as well, like I said, there's different models. That particular rattle as well is this. There was a certain amount of rattles. But this is important. There was a certain model, sorry, not amount, a certain model rattle that you can't pull the radiator out from the back. All right, it was sort of built in the engine compartment. You have to pull the engine out to get the radiator. That was a bit of a bummer. All right, but because with this rattle we had Rundu, there's sort of a good spare part supply available. So we changed the engine for the new one, and while we're there, we put in a new radiator. All done, all ready to go. I done the vital checks, take it for a spin, report back that the rattle, whoever's rattle it was, must have been some higher up ranking guy that had problems with his rattle, said, before I go back, this rattle needs an engine change. Or the operator, like I said, some of the operators, they were switched on. They honestly, I'll give them credit. Anyway, cut the long story short, so the sergeant, instead of checking the little SAML 20 mobile workshop, check all the vital signs like we've done with our victims, they just sort of lay back and carried on like pork chops, washed. They all had a chance to wash their overalls, and before I know it, they were all gone, and here I am, where did the rest of my guys go? Oh no, they already on their way to the Deurgangskamp. What's a Deurgangskamp? It's like a temporary base, just across that the river from Rundu, across the river, you go over those the floating bridge over there, and there's this big Deurgangskamp with tent, and I can recall there were showers there as well. So I bumped the lift with one of the officers. I can't even remember, military vehicle that's going in that same direction. So I just waved him down. I can't even remember exact what vehicle it was. I said, look, I need to be with those guys. They all fucked off. You know what I mean? And they left me there behind, Okay, long story short, I sort of got the message, again, I'm the outie, I'm the dislikable person. Anyway, cut the long story short, I made my little food there, found a tent there, because everybody's all over. It's like an ant, everybody's doing things and it's carrying on like a pork chop. And when I had a shower, there was a dude there that says, oh, he's not going back in this operation. It's too dangerous carrying on. And so he shot himself with his R4 through his big toe. And he even showed me the wound. And I thought, oh, hang on, is it that bad there, And he said, oh, it's serious, man. The people are dying like flies, And I sort of, I went into this sort of, hang on. I've volunteered for something now. That's really, really, really bad. Cut a long story short, course, the next morning, early that next morning, one of my friends that was an apprentice with me, he must have heard or recognized my name and my surname. So the next morning, before we went back to Rundu, because we had to go backwards and forwards to Rundu to get all the stuff ready that needs to go with this convoy. And he came and picked me up with a scrambler, a military scrambler. And yeah, it's like, hey, shit, how did you even recognize me? He said, get on the back here, I want to go and show you something. Took me up to where another tent is, and of course, I'll tell you, it scared the shit out of me. Here was all the kids of the fallen comrades already. And I roughly counted there was 45 kids already lying in that tent, and that hit me in the heart, like in the chest. It took my breath away. And he said to me, Dries, are you sure you want to go? I said, I think we used to call him Suidwester because he was from Suidwest or Namibia. It was just a nickname. And I said, look, I'm committed. I've got a family back home, but I'm going. It's scary stuff. It's scary stuff. It brings you very, very close to your maker. And so I said goodbye to him, and I thanked him for the warnings. And you sort of work a little bit harder on your prayers, and not knowing what's about to hit me in that bush there. Because remember now, this is the first time for me even going across that bridge into Angola, and you're ready. All these little warning signs pop up and carrying on, people shooting themselves in the foot not to go. It's not a good advertisement. Anyway, so we went back the next day again, and I had a chance to at least clean my overalls and do a little bit of reconnaissance work, exactly what's going on, just get a bit of a feel for this. We've just changed this rattle engine, and then a lot of people were telling me what's going on. And then although hang on, I've got an R4, but I've got no ammo. I've got nothing. What's going on here? So I've then done a bit of a search through some of the other rattles that were standing there that wasn't part of the deal, because they were all already over the river with the other vehicles. And same deal again, I was left behind, no one bothered. I could have easily just stayed there and just ignored everything, because I was the outsider. I managed to find, they come in like a plastic bag, more, maybe the military sort of guys really knows. It was like there was 200 rounds in there, 200, there was boxes. They weren't little boxes, but there was 200, because it's the reason why I know that it's set on the thing. And I looked at the date, that it's still like fresh, it's gonna drop someone if I need to drop someone. Anyway, I got that. It's part of my kit, and I've got all my stuff ready. And again, I bombed the lift back, telling the guy, I need to be there. So that's it. By the time I got there, because you won't believe it, by the time I got over the bridge with my lift bump, with my kitters and my R4, and at least I got ammo now, okay? No food, no nothing, no nada. I just stand there and I've tried to find around. The convoy was already lined up. The convoy was ready to go. Hang on, so where's this macho sergeant of ours? I had no radio, I had no communication. The convoy is too long to walk up to each vehicle to find out what's going on. Long story short, the last vehicle, there was someone sitting in there, and I said to him something in the line of, is there space in the passenger seat for me? Can I go with you? And he said, oh, well, look, that's no problem. I'm actually with another group. They just put me in this vehicle. But if you want to drive it, it's yours, So I'm right in the back of the convoy, and here I've got a Quafuel that was loaded up with some spare parts and a variety of batteries and a variety of radiators and a variety of filters. everything, and the vehicle was already idling. I couldn't check the oil. I couldn't check it. Anyway, of course, it wasn't. I hardly had my kit in those boxes on the side. The R4. By the way, the R4 doesn't fit in those brackets inside the Quairfools because it's designed for the R1. So you've got to make a little plan there. I've got some water in there for me, and so I'm good to go now. And off we go. And guess what? Within the first 2 kilometers, starts my Quairfool. Doesn't want to go. Nah, fuel starvation. Immediately there was a problem. Luckily for me, one of the Wittungster, all right, was behind me. For some reason, they pulled over and I went past them, and then they must have been told that one of the Wittungster must stay at the back, right at the back. Anyway, so there's my vehicle. Within the first kilometer or so, problems. Anyway, luckily, like you said, your words, I still had power steering because the vehicle would still idle. But as soon as I give it throttle, it splutters. So I still had power steering. So the guy, because there's the bushy area, you can't just chop and change in the push. He, what's the name? He pushed me from behind till that evening, till darkness, so I can work on it. I fixed that. So now I had a running vehicle, and away we go, Chris. So that was the first incident, and we kept going for course. It takes us about, I think it took our whole convoy getting to the main base a whole week, because it's slow go, vehicles break down and vehicles give problems, and we have to all jump out, fix them. Then they all scoot off behind the rattles, and then we have to get these vehicles going, and then and then we have to pack our own tools up again, and then we have to catch up. So a whole week, and then we arrived at that base. And I think when you done the interview with SV, of course, we arrived at a temporary base. It was a huge temporary base. However, the Cubans and the Russians and the Floplots didn't know how big that base was, because we were scattered all over, but we were all part of that base. And that was the one where Esbia was talking about sitting high up in the tree, and he could see certain things going on. Because as a Tiffy, we overheard some of the conversations as to what's going on, and we were close enough to hear the G5s. Every day we could hear them. Basically, it was like a wake-up call in the morning, and then it's all game on.
I believe that's where the mix was circling.
Yes, Chris. The mix was a big problem for us, Chris. The mix, they bothered us quite a lot. We were traveling mainly from there. The first out of that camp, your first night or two, you travel at night time just to get out of the range of the mix. We worked during the day most of the times, and we worked as quiet and as you don't have to leopard crawl, because the trees were quite high. They were really, really high. If you can recall, even Esvia said, he's climbing up those trees. They were really, really high. What the mix did is, of course, and they did hit us one day. What they did is, and what I could understand from the sit rep and the information we get, is they just sort of an area bombardment. They what's the name? What's it? A 500-pounder or whatever. They throw them just randomly where they think we are, and then just hope and pray they're gonna hit something. I know they use drag bombs and all sorts of different things. They did hit us. There was no casualties and there was no injuries. I think a 3-2 guy got burned, or a Unita guy got some of the phosphor burns. And I believe there was another guy that didn't want to go into his foxhole, and he got burned as well, you know. So they got themselves to blame. And I can just say, of course, in the convoys, just I've jumped a little bit forward now, but in the convoys as well, traveling arse to arse, you know, the vehicles suck in a lot of dust, you know. The twin Donaldson filters on the side with the quairfoils and the fittings, and that they get choked up so quickly, you know. It's almost nightly or daily you have to take those filters out and shake it, and the dust is fine. It's like baby powder. It's like that powder women put on their faces. That's how, you know, fine that is, and it chokes them up, and the vehicles start burning more fuel, you know, and all that. But that brings me to our first attack that was being launched, because we had our mission that I was dealt in with in that group was, we had the MVL mobile vuurpyl lanceer, MRLs, mobile rocket launchers. We had the mobile rocket. There was 12 of them. The Unimog, basically with that with those rockets on the back. I think they could take, and if there's one of the guys that was there that can recall all these things I want to talk about, I don't want to steal their thunder, you know. There's 24 rockets in a pack, and we had 12 of those ones. And we also there was also we helped them load these things. There's like a little black thing, because it's like a sensor thing. It gets screwed in the front of this, and the rocket's, it's quite heavy, that rocket as well. That determines the distance where it's gonna, when it's gonna, like an air burst. And yeah, we went out. I remember that night, obviously the Ratels in front, because the Ratels would they would bundu bash a road via satellite. We lost the satellite signal, the convoy stopped, you know. And then there's a few, you know, in such darkness, even with the moon, you know, people, we move forward at a reasonable rate, and then when they suddenly stop, you know, there's a bit of a boom, 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 boom. They crash into each other, you know. They bend the bull bars, they bend radiators, gets damaged or pushed into the fan. Anyway, we made it there, and they set up these things, of course. And in all honesty, that road, part of our our duty was to cut off that road. Was called the road of life and death. That was the main vein that supplied Kwitu Carnival, right? And our job, or that group of guys that was there with all our 3-2 battalion guys, the mortar groups, the stopper groups, they were all there. So those guys' jobs was to cut the convoys all the time. As soon as the reconnaissance guys let them know there's something worthwhile, then it's game on. And then obviously when it's game on for them, it's game on for us, because we got to make sure that they get there safely, they all get there, and they can all do their thing, and they all get back. The funny thing is, of course, that night, yeah, we loaded them. They all fully loaded, go into this open sauna area, full moon. And honestly, of course, you get that sort of a very, that eerie feeling, you know, what's about to happen within the next half an hour or so. It's going to be deadly. There's no other word to describe it. You know, all those things. Then what they do is, there's a certain group of guys, they send up a weather balloon, big, massive balloon with a gas, with a little radio thing. The guy showed me, they break it open, and then it mixes the liquids, and it gives off 24 volt, I think, for so many hours, a lot more than what we needed. Then when they release it, they take a reading for the wind, how the wind blows. And that gets punched into the, I think it was the Ratel, the main officer in charge. And that sends out a figure for all the different MRLs to set up the direction of of the rockets, the whole pack. You know, they put out their legs. We got to help them make sure all the legs goes out, and the packet goes up, the hydraulics all set up, everything ready to go. And then of course it's just, you know, because a lot of people don't realize, and I want to tell you something funny about it as well at a later stage, but you know, for me, from where I've come from now, I took note of the nature as well, and I'm sure there's other people that was like me as well. You know, of course, even the little sun beetles, you know, everything went quiet. That was one of the most weirdest feelings I've ever had, and I can't describe it. Whether other people feel the same, because you know something bad is about to happen. Anyway, of course, it's all quiet, and then those guys get the order to fire their rockets. And as you know, those rockets got a firing order. They fire this one, then that one, that one, that one. And there's 12 of them. So you can imagine, boy, oh boy, oh boy. I think we've only, out of all of them, I think it's, 96 rockets or something. Out of all of them, we've had 3 airbursts. So they pop. When they go out the rocket and the wings come out, there's something wrong, but it's a safety feature. So they away from us and they malfunction and they explode. But funny enough, it's like a shoot and scoot. So once the last rocket is away, those those guys pick up those little hydraulic feet at the back, lower that packet, start their vehicles. And funny enough, the rattles were in front. Again, you could hear that rattle, you know, that funny rattle humming in the darkness. They're fucking long gone, mate. Long gone. Here's the Tiffys again. Oh, now we got to jumpstart that dude. We got to jumpstart this vehicle, you know, because we have to stay behind and get them all going, you know. And it's a shoot and scoot. Everyone says, oh, yeah, well, if the Russians or the Cubans pick up where these rockets came from, there'll be fucking hell to play. So it was scary stuff. Of course, I've seen the guys move so quick. And of course, we're behind and last. You see things happen that's funny. Of course, big 106 toolboxes full of spanners. They bounce off the truck. And there's no way we're going to stop to pick up that toolbox because we're shit scared. We were, mate, I'm telling you now, I was shitting myself. Someone that says it does affect you, mate. I was honestly, and generators, little generators, they bounce off and they roll one side. There's no way we stop to pick them up. No way. And the sad part of it is the rattles, when they come this way, they bundu bash. And then when they go that way, you know, you get those stubborn little trees and sticks and stuff that, you know, the rattle missed them. It doesn't flatten them. So they now point this way still, and it hits the radiators. All the Unimorgs and the Buffles, they all, you know, then we sit with overheating problems again. So the next day you change the radiators because they got punctured. It's just such a vicious circle. But of course, with the next day with the sit rep, those boys, credit to them, they were spot on. The reports that came back says it was an absolutely mess. It was a disaster. You know, the reconnaissance guys, you know, we don't know where they are, but they can see a lot of things, and they report back and they said some of the rockets went over the convoy. And the dudes that decided that's not going to sleep under the trucks, they're going to sleep in the bush. So those rockets, it's called an overshoot. And honestly, they bled. I don't know, SV and those guys, the higher up, I can't remember all the ranking names. That was a huge success, and they bled. They bled. I don't know, and it's scary shit, man. I'll tell you. Anyway, that was the story, Chris. I was also then sent from that base. I was sent to a smaller base, a smaller base that's not that far. It was about a night's drive. I can't tell you the kilometers because it's like this. And I went with the sergeant major. The sergeant major was actually our sergeant major that he does all the fueling, the logistics. And why he picked me, I don't know, but we went there, and that was the night. We were traveling for about 20 minutes or so, and he told me to pull over, and he said, mix, you know, and I remember his words as clearly as that day. He said, "Oh, we're just gonna hang around here till they run out of petrol, you know, type of thing, you know, let them fly." And they were obviously looking for us, but I think it was about an hour or so, and away we go. And we came to this small base, Chris, and this is strange. I've never ever met a reconnaissance guy in person. Never ever. I mean, I'm a Tiffy. I'm not if you know what I mean. And it's the first time I've been in Angola. It's the first time I met a reconnaissance guy. The reason why I know he was a reconnaissance guy, because he introduced me, but he didn't introduce me as lieutenant or captain or whatever, so and so, or telling me that he's a recce. This dude was butt naked. Okay. He was in his jocks. Okay. Not butt naked, but he was in his jocks. He had this big stick. He looked like Moses. Okay. Seriously, he had this big stick with a drip. There was a drip hanging on it, and he had a drip in his arm. So he obviously had either malaria or some food poisoning or something, because he just appeared out of the bush. Because when we arrived, it was dead quiet, and then he appeared here. So that's how I sort of figured it out. He said hello to me, and I said hello to him, and we had a bit of a yak. The reason I was there is because it actually, till today, I'm still pissed off. That same sergeant major, there was a buffle there that had fuel problems. What the sergeant major did is he removed the fuel line. The buffle's tank is a plastic tank, sits under the seats. Okay. And to get to that tank, you have to remove all this. But what he'd done is he somehow got a hold of a shifting span or something and used little fucking sticks, you know, like little, to try and unblock but as soon as the stick will break off, and then he'll use another one to push that one out. And so the thing couldn't get fuel. He made my life hell, because we had to pull all those seats. I think it's 10 seats, all the safety belts, all the seats, everything out to get to the tank, to clear all that shit out of the tank and put it all back together. Oh, man, that was... And then funny enough, as Tiffies, we always need water to wash. We need to clean ourselves. Hygiene is very hard for a Tiffy as well, because of the fuels and the oils and the grease and the, you know, under the vehicles, over the vehicles, battery acid. And the recce warned us, and he said to us, don't go into it was like a little creek there. Don't go to that little creek there and just grab the water. Just go one at a time, get your water, wet your overalls, and come back undercover, because he said the MiGs were busy in that area. There was like a sauna there, but they come in low in the saunas, as you know, and he warned us. So it was this constant fear of, you know, they're going to pick you up, are they not going to pick you up, are they going to pick you up, and you're not going to. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, I was then put back in another vehicle to go back to our main base with strange enough, with a 3-2 black guy. I can't remember his name. And the reason why I can't remember his name is because he can't speak English. But he was a comrade. He was next to me. And we got home safely. Back to the base safely.
Well, it's an amazing story, Dries. I'm still wondering. I mean, you left the deurgangskamp without any food. So how did you feed yourself?
That's a very good question, Chris. What happened was halfway, I would say on day 2 or 3, that sergeant major, he sets up a fueling point. So all you really see is him coming out and then block you in the road. He's very well camouflaged, okay? And then what happened with me is, because at that stage I was still alone in the vehicle. I was the only guy in that truck, in that Quefuel. And as you know, with 3-2 Battalion and all those guys, we used to call them a kar. We didn't call them Quefuels or Withhounds or Unimog. It was called a kar. Klim in your car and ry. You know, everything was called a car. And so what happened then is, of course, when I got the fuel, this was about, I think, day 2 or day 3. Yeah, look, I had a little bit of water with me, and I had still some of my civilian food with me. But at that stage, I had no rat packs either. But there, when you know, when you put the snorkel in the fuel tank and you put it on auto, it keeps running. I then got out and asked the sergeant major if he hasn't got some rat packs for me or some sort of. I can remember there was a bit of a. I said, well, you know, where do I get the food from? No one told me nothing. I don't even know where the sergeant is. Blah 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 blah. Carry on. Anyway, he gave me a whole box. There, they give you a whole box for 30 days. So he gave me a whole box of rat packs, and then I was okay. But that's a good question. I actually forgot about that part. Because I'll tell you, at some stage I was so tired helping the vehicles going forward, and I'm not. Don't see it as if I'm blowing up a bit of smoke up my own ass or inflating my own tires. That's not the case. I did it not for me. I did it for the boys. And being alone in a vehicle sometimes is hard, because you do nod off, you do get tired, you do fall asleep. Because honestly, I'm not shy to say it or even mention it. I used to, because you strapped in, you know, I used to fall asleep, and then the vehicle would just keep going, go off road, and you start hitting the trees, and there's actually those trees that's sweeping past that armored cab that wakes you up. You know, you think you shit, you know, and then you realize, hang on, I'd fallen asleep. You know, I can't describe it because in words. What I've done there as well is, because, and you start to stink, you know, because you can't shower, and you know the diesel. Oh man, you smell like shit, man. I'll tell you honestly, you do, and it's terrible. Because your overalls is full of, you know, it's terrible. But and then I made a big mistake. I caught up with a buffel. I think they were part of the stopper group, and they were dienstpligtiges, course. And I asked the corporal. I said, "Isn't there one of the dienstpligtiges there, the young lads or the what's the names that want to ride with me, you know, in the cab, instead of sitting in that open buffel getting milkshaked around, you know?" And mate, I tell you, it's like the guy's already in. I haven't even finished talking. He was in the vehicle with me, in the car next to me, strapped himself in. And guess what? When I heard first gear and pulled away, sleeping. So what was the point? I was hoping to get someone to talk to me, and the poor guy's gone. Anyway, that being said, I also want to give a lot of credit to the Unita guys. One day we got stuck with a recovery vehicle with a victims. We pulled the chain tight between us. This vehicle couldn't move forward or backward, and our victims couldn't move backward or forward. So, and the chain, a big chain, is pulled tight, and it was raining. Of course, it was raining nonstop. And I remember the lieutenant, he was going to try and splice the chain with plastic explosives just to separate the two. And then he thought, no, we're too close, might attract a bit of attention, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, the next morning, of course, I don't know how they done it. The next morning, there was probably about 15 Unitas there with their machetes, their pangas. And they start chopping trees down, and they built a road for us, you know, with all those branches. It's almost like a highway. That was incredible, man. And then I want to quickly tell you, before we get to that rattle courses, we got a request from the Unita guys that if we could, and I want to tell you this because this is important. we get this request from the Unita guys that they've got this old Mercedes-Benz truck. Okay, this is ingenious, and there's something wrong with the one left rear spring hanger, the hanger itself. And because they've heard that we've got a welding machine, we if we could fix it for them. Said, yeah, no problem, you know. Tiffy's, mate, we fix anything, you know. We'll look at it, you know. Anyway, so it was like a funny green, olive green color one of these old round nose Mercedes Benzes. I can't remember the model. The thing was so bruised and battered, but it's still going. Anyway, I have to tell you this because it's important. So we pulled the vehicle in. We had a look at it. You know what they've done to fix their problem temporarily? They take us. There's a certain tree in Angola, and they take the bark, and they wrap it around it. Okay, when it's wet and pliable, and when it dries out, it becomes becomes like a metal clamp around it, and that's how they asked, how long you been driving it like this? And they said, oh, 3-4 weeks. You know, you can't. So we had to we had to cut all that off, and we welded this thing back for them, you know, very nicely and very professionally to the best of our ability. You know, we could have easily, if we had a spare part, change parts over, but that type of vehicle we don't carry. But we've done a good job on it. The reason why I want to tell you this is because a week later we had another breakdown. We went out, okay, and then another vehicle break down. So I jumped on this vehicle to fix it, while my buddy driver in the Quairfool is gonna pick up another vehicle, but it's basically on the same road. Okay, so I fixed this vehicle and he scoots off. He's finished, and there I stand. I gotta now wait for my buddy to come back with his Quairfool to pick me up. And I thought to myself, you know what? Here I am standing in the middle of Angola on a road. I don't even know what the road's name is. It's somewhere in Angola. It's somewhere near Cuito Carnaval. It's somewhere, you know, and I'm looking at the stars, and, you know, your ass is doing a little bit of this. I've got my trusty R4 with me, and, you know, it's pitch dark. And I saw this small little, like a light coming through the bushes. And I thought, oh, yes, shit coming my way that I don't need or don't want. But I stood my ground. I just sort of hanged around politely. I obviously made sure that I'm ready. You know what I mean? Nothing to do with grensvechter and all those type of. You know, I was just a bit concerned, you know, and you know, if I have to die, I'm just fucking not going down with a fight. Guess what? Here comes that same green fucking little Mercedes-Benz Unita truck with its little light. It hasn't got lights. It's just got a little handheld thing coming through the bushes. And I thought, hey, we've done such a good job for them. You know, the vehicle is still mobile. It's all work. They all just wave. You know, it's all dark. You know, you can't really see faces and all that. And yeah, so that was a good plus as well, of course.
You know, Dries, you were talking non-stop and I was quiet for once. And I actually saw you getting younger and younger here as you relived those days. It was fascinating, and I think a lot of people will confirm that. But what happened to your sergeant? The PF guy, the permanent force fellow?
Okay, Chris. Yes, I'm going to tell you now, because that's now part of the rattle that stands in the river. We moved. You know, the army, I must say those guys were clever. So we moved spots again. We moved again to a different, you know, and of course, you know, Mother Nature calls. So you take your little spade and your roll of toilet paper and you go and dig a hole, you know, and we were told if you stay longer at a certain place, you've got to dig the hole deeper, you know, and you know, it's the old story, don't shit in your own nest. So you got to walk further and further away from where the base is to go and do Mother Nature, you know. And they had a funny little dung beetle as well. Honestly, that dung beetle looked like it also had there was a guy in Rundu that used to draw them by pencil. I wish he made those things public. He was also heavy into nature as well. And anyway, so we moved base course, and then basically what happened was that the sergeant was only there for maybe 2 weeks. In fact, I didn't even see him again. Course, I didn't since the first day at Rundu, when he said, "Oh, well, that Radl needs a new engine," and a few other guys had a few other things there, and the spanner and all that. I didn't really had contact with him again. It's going a little bit backwards again, but within the message that I got is that he just complained about he had a heart bypass. He said the heart's playing up, blah, 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 blah. And I don't know how he got out, whether he got out with a convoy, because as you know, there was convoys going up and down all the time to bring in supplies and the ammunition and all those sort of things. He was gone. I've never ever seen him again, and that was part of the I don't want to use the word mess, the creation that we've landed in, is that here I am with the two-liner. He was a two-liner, I was a one-liner legally, and then we also had this groot back artificially made one-liner, if you know what I mean. And I didn't appreciate it, but it's the military. We all armed to the teeth. There's not much you can do or say, or create an infight. So, a part of my inner is, I could work with people, whether they like me or don't like me, when they left me behind. I got the message. I wasn't a likable person. I got the message, but that didn't change the fact that I could repair the vehicles and that I was there. I was there. I'd spoken to 3-2 people. I've spoken to people from the stopper groups, the guys with their mortars. I've spoken to the medics, because the medics, they used to, when they give the guys injections, they used to take the injection and push it into the tree, because there's no real sharp bin or anything, or dig a hole type of thing. What they've done is they peg it into the tree, and the trees where the temporary basis was, the trees were full of injections. People, some of them had malaria and various disease. I mean, even the sergeant major that helped me out with the rat packs, and which I knew later on, that said, he's now basically the higher ranking. He'll look after the Tiffy sort of thing. If we need anything, we could easily, come and ask him for the whatever needs we have. But most of the stuff that we didn't have was stuff that the sergeant made. He types it into like a little. It was almost back then like a small little keyboard, and then they use. It's almost like an Enigma machine. He showed us. So he type in, say for instance, we asked for a box of welding rods. He'll type in what we need, the welding rods. And then when it gets sent, it gets encrypted. So the ABCs and stuff, that's how I understand it, gets sent to Rundu or wherever he sends it. It gets encrypted, so the what's her name couldn't pick it up, because we had a Casper there as well that's got all the radars, and we used to sometimes just, just young, listen to the sounds, and those MiG pilots and Czech pilots, and the way they talk, on the radios, and looking for us and try to find us, and the bullshit that goes on with the military. The sergeant major also had malaria, of course, and I've seen that in real action. That was also very, very sad. One day, when you get that malaria, I don't know if you I think you do know. 1 minute is icy cold. 1 minute is icy cold, and then we'll throw all our sleeping bags over him, and then the next moment his fever is so high, we'll pull all the bags off and then help him, and then he'll jump in the water cart, knowingly that's the water we're going to drink the next day. But that's what we done, Koos. That's how it worked. And funny enough, someone burned our water cart's clutch. And as you know, water is a lifeline, So, every night someone has to get into that car. We just started because it had no clutch. But what we've done is we had no clutch to replace it with. So we'll pull it with another vehicle to the river to use its pump and everything to suck the water in for our water supply. So it was, well, that's just how it is, Chris. It's
it is. I had malaria 3 times. And I always say to people, if you come back from Africa or you were in a malaria area and you start feeling like a cold, just go to the doctors and tell them you were at the malaria area. They can test for you. And you need to break that fever if you start overeating. It's really bad. I mean, a lot of people die every year of malaria.
Yes.
And I just want to say to everyone here as well, these armored vehicles, they don't have aircon or anything in them unless they're a command rattle and they need it for, to cool down the radios. But 99% of them, no aircon, and it's flipping warm there. It's really warm there. That's why you will see the guys in their underwear and sweating, and you can sweat a bit in those armored vehicles because you have to close all the doors or the dust will come in. And if you don't close all the damn doors, well, once you've closed it, there's no windows which goes down. So it can get like an oven.
That's 100% correct, Chris. And now finally I can tell you about the rattle. What happened with that particular rattle with its bum in the river? It wasn't there to get a wash or a bathe, Chris. Yes, we were all in our underwear. I'll explain I'll explain it a little bit better as we go along. That particularly rattle made it all the way from Rundu to there. But what happened was, because some of them do develop tiny little leaks in the back engine compartment, which is in the back. But it's not severe where they start to boil or the heat gauge just keep climbing, where the operator has to, start becoming a problem, says, I can't drive it any further. Yes, he realizes on his instruments there is something doesn't go on, but that's why I say they were tough vehicles. And because the radiator sits in the back as well, what happens, because that thing's got an enormous fan, and that's part of the photo to prove what I'm about to say. It's got a huge fan that's hydraulically driven. So as the thing gets hotter, the fan will go faster and slower, and so it will keep on adjusting it as needed. But if you can now imagine, a fan is also part of suction. So it will suck the dust from the front rattle, will suck that dust that's coming over it. Remember, the trees makes a canopy, so it traps that dust in there. The dust can't just disappear. So when that rattle is running full ball, with the fan running full ball, that dust will get sucked in those grids by that very same fan and then get pushed at the back through the radiator. Now, under normal circumstances, if it drives on the bitumen road, it will just suck normal clean air through there and everything is hunky-dory. In the bush, it doesn't work like that way, especially in Angola. So what happened with that particular one? It developed a small oil leak. It's an oil leak we call like a seep. So it's not an oil leak. If you open up the bonnet, it's sort of like squirting out the oil there that you can see. It clearly wasn't that. That particular one had a seepage from Rundu. So when it was traveling with that speed, what will happen is it will suck that dust in and will also pick up some of the oil and push it straight into the radiator. Okay. Then what happens is, as the radiator gets hot, it will start bake that sand, and sand contains a little bit of clay. It will start bake that stuff hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold, and it starts to make the rattle overheat. Now, that rattle, remember I said to you as well, there's certain mark rattles. You can't just remove that cover at the back and pull the radiator out. Firstly, we didn't have a spare radiator, all right? Secondly, that rattle, to get that radiator out and to clean it properly, we had to pull the engine out. Okay. That special tool that we made, funny enough, that disappeared with the other group. Okay. So we sort of start creating a snowball effect. So what happened is we came up with this idea, and I said to the boys, I said, look, let's take the rattle, and obviously while it's standing with its ass in there, is obviously you've got to think now mix. Yes, we were in our underclothes. You've got to think fire, all right? And you got to think of all the warnings that we've been given is to go and do what you guys need to do, but come back ASAP. All right. So that was a river near the Lombard area, Kwitu Carnival. I don't know, because I didn't have a map, I didn't have a radio, I didn't have a compass. I could only tell you it was a relatively biggish river, all right, that I know about. So we decided we're going to take a fire bucket of petrol with us. So what we did is, because the idea was to soften all that clay and oil and diesel and mud and shit, to soften that with the petrol, okay, with a brush and soak the radiator for a few minutes so it becomes soft. We had no steam cleaner or hose pipe that you can rinse it. So that's what I'm saying to you in the beginning. Remember, these are things that's not written in a Denel manual for the rattles, or that the guy that hit me over the head could explain in front of that class, or it's nothing like that. This is just ways we have to come up for our country, for our people, for our, for our cause at the time. I know it doesn't matter anymore, but it was still interesting at the time. So what we then did is, Chris, and this is going to tell you why I say that those rattles are built tough. Once we've softened it with petrol and everything, and that's why we're standing in our jocks, in case a fucking thing catch fire, we can all jump in the river. Can you imagine if one of us got roasted there and the whole rattle is on fire and everything? That's why we took our clothes off. It's less chance of having to deal with clothes. You could just jump in the river. And so that was part of it. The other part of it was, now that the radiator is soft and everything, we pushed the rattle into the river. Now, I know it's not very environmentally friendly, but we done most of the dirt outside of the river. Then we put that rattle full bore so that fan is running at a highest speed that we can. And we just drowned this thing with 5 buckets of water, one after the other. And just shows you how strong that fan is, going flat out. I don't know the RPMs. The rattle Tiffys can tell how fast that thing goes. And throwing that bucket in. If you look nicely at that photo, you can see the black stuff actually coming through the radiator as it draws the air in, and as the air in the water, and pushes that stuff out of the radiator, obviously into the river. But that was just the last little bit. So we kept on flushing it. But yeah, the jocks, well, obviously we had a nice good swim as well in the process, and a nice bath, and wash your overalls quickly, and that was part of it. Fire, safety, mix, got the job done. That rattle came back with Operation Packer, I believe, and still had a small leak, but it was clean enough to make it score back, if you know what I mean, without having to change the engine. Or where are we going to get an engine? Where are we going to get a radiator? Where are we going to get all the tools? So there's the long and the short of that one, because it's a long story, but it was at the time it was very interesting.
No, it's still interesting. I think it's fascinating, because I'm also thinking now, if your overalls were so covered with oil, it would probably burn quite quickly if it gets a flame close to it. So getting there into your underwear is perhaps not a bad idea. But this reminds me, I have another picture of you. I think you're changing the engine of a Quafuel or something.
Yes, Chris.
And that thing doesn't seem to have a radiator.
No, they don't have. The Quafuel is similar as Samuel 100. Samuel 100 being a paper cap, where the Quafuel being military, they got all animal names, and like I say, in the bush, it was just called the kar. Klim in jou fucking kar and ry, that type of thing. So that was the same as a Samuel Horner, same engine. There was no discrimination there, same performance, just a different cab, with subtle differences here, there. I mean, the Samuel, and I remember as well, the Samuel's got like a solid bonnet where the Quaffle's just got a grill. But you're right, Koos, and I want to tell you something about that as well, is that, yes, it's a air-cooled engine. They got injectors underneath the piston, just a small little basic inside of the engine that squirts oil. Every time the engine is fired, it squirts oil under the piston. Firstly, it helps for the cooling, and secondly, it also helps for noise. It suppresses the noise because, as you know, there's no water jacket, so inherently, an air-cooled engine is normally a little bit noisier than a water-cooled, because it doesn't have all these water jackets that works as a sound suppressor or a deadening. And so the German engineers has just engineered that in there, and obviously got a big, massive fan, same as the Ratel, obviously smaller, that gets driven, and it flows over the cooling fins, to the back. Sadly, you get that with most of your air-cooled engines. The rear cylinders, especially with a V10 or a V8 or a V12, the rear cylinders tend to cop a lot of the heat. So the first 3 or 4 cylinders gets cooled, but that same heat now needs to travel to the back, but it's already been starting to slowly heat up. So, and that's why there's oil coolers involved, and it's an ingenious engine. But those engines are very, very good. Because I can remember also, just briefly off that subject as well, on that particular engine where we changed the engine over on that one. We've also briefly worked on one of those. I think it was a Quay 100 as well, that had the anti-aircraft, the South African version of the anti-aircraft in the back, and to my amazement, the guy showed me, and that thing gets turned by your feet. It's not hydraulically. He actually turns it with his feet and the rumor has it that that particularly guy was one of the guys that actually took a MiG down, or that vehicle or that gun was one that took a MiG down as well in one of the other battles. I think there was a MiG-21 shot down by one of our anti-aircrafts. I'm not 100% sure, but that was a rumor. But again, one of those vehicles gave us problems, and as you know, we don't have all the tools. And I think what we've done is, I wish someone hears this conversation and can bring a little bit of more clarity to it, because I can't remember all these things, but I can remember one of the Quaffles gave problems, and what we've done is had a misfire. So what we've done is we just took those injector pipes off to make those cylinders that misfire. So we basically changed the V10 into a V8, all right? And we just that's all we could do, Chris, honestly. We shut 2 cylinders down, and the vehicle was still, it wasn't performing the way it was. But like I say, sorry to Jannie Geldenay, sorry to the army, sorry to all the masters out there, but that's what we had to do, Chris, and it did work. Those other buffels that you see hanging in the air that's been destroyed, obviously we can't fix them. They go to the scrapyard and those sort of things. But all of the vehicles that I was with and worked on, all of them was made mobile again. All of them stayed alive till I left. In other words, till Operation Packer happened and they packed them up. The reason why I know that is because my brother-in-law, Emmy's brother, we walked past each other at Grootfontein. So Operation Hooper and Modular was finished, and the Flossie that they came, that dropped them off, and they marched past us, we marched past them after we done all that geen skerpend ammunisie in my besit, if you know what I mean. And I asked him, and he said, no, they brought 99% of vehicles that's obviously not mobile would get either destroyed or, And like I say, we left many spare parts. You just dig a hole. Some of the radiators got smashed. Some batteries, of course, the guys at the stores don't, and I can't blame them. They don't pack the things properly. It don't get stacked. It don't get bolted down. We've lost so many batteries, because it's unreal. Radiators. Then you ask for a Buffalo radiator, they send you a Unimog radiator. Send you a Unimog radiator, you get a Buffalo radiator. Because a lot of our stuff, of course, I'll quickly want to tell you this as well. It gets flown in with the Pumas, and I remember you ask about how does the Pumas come in. Obviously, they come in at night. What we do is, of course, the sergeant major get us to where he's got his dedicated LZ or landing zone. We take all the dead grass and stuff away because it's sand, and we make like a little opening area there, and we put just a few small little branches there, and we put petrol there, okay, but we don't light it, and we keep a little bit spare. It's dangerous, of course, but that's the things that we've done. You got to think of not getting fire on yourself like we done with the rattle. But anyway, so when Big Bird comes in, you'll hear them talk on the radio, Big Bird, and then the pilot will make comms, and then they'll start talking, and then the sergeant major will just give us a bevel, or and then we'll light those three fires just briefly, so that the pilot can just see where's the center of that triangle. And then with the extra sand we've got, once the pilot confirms that he knows what's going on, what's what in the zoo, we put that fire out immediately. That's how they've come in. Of course, I've also, out of interest, I've helped them refuel the Pumas. They got an extra bladder inside, especially when they bring in or take a casevac out, or bring in some of our supplies, whatever we've requested, either a radiator or whatever. And I remember one night the chopper, the tail rotor hit a tree. The pilot must have, I don't know, but he had a little torch there, and I don't know much about it, but I showed an interest, and we looked at it, and we couldn't see any damage. I mean, they're not made out of plastic, they real. So, but Big Bird was safe, and we help him pump out. The guy checks at the expiry date on the 44s, and I think that was an invention of a South African as well, that can pump that Jet A1 straight out of that 44 into the chopper. So that was interesting, course. That river where the rattle is, and it's with its ass in that river. Sadly, that morning I took roll call, course. Sadly, and of course I can't forget his face. I can't. There was a lad I took roll call that morning, and his surname was Stewart. And as you go, you look up to, before you make sure, it's like a type of not a proper roll call, but it's just to make sure who's where and where's what. And it was by instruction of the sergeant major. And sadly, of course, he died. That river, we used to go there and wash our clothes, and the boys being boys. You have a bit of a swim, you have a bit of a, and they started a bit of a playing, the old what's it called, bullfight, on your shoulders, and sadly, the next moment we all just heard, where's Stewart, and Stewart was sadly, he was too long under the water, and we carried him up, and he was that was sad, because we had to cover him in a sleeping bag. There was no body bags, and the chopper, when the sign goes out that it's too violent, there's too much going on, the choppers can't come in. As simple as that. I think it was 2 or 3 days before there was a casevac with old Stewart, course, and like I say, it's things that our Tiffys have to go through with him, and my heart is with him, because we were part of it, if you know what I mean, course, and they were all good blokes, and I'm sure they would have done the same for me, And I remember asking the sergeant major, what are they going to tell his parents? And the sergeant major words to me was this, because he said, only the truth, Dries, only the truth. So it reminds me a lot of Scully, but yeah. So that photo where I stand there with my shorts on there, that's part of that photo was, as you know, of course, we can't just take willy-nilly photos, you don't have rolls and rolls and rolls of, and that part of that photo, I've thought about it, that I could capture that as a memory, of course. Sometimes it eats hard, it eats hard, those things, don't come back. And more on a sort of a joking note, of course, I just want to quickly start and try and wrap this up. I want to tell you two little things quickly as well. Our Tiffys, I'm sure the other guys did it as well. At nighttime, we had this little, we would pinch a tail light or something out of a vehicle, and put some extra wire on it and make like a little lamp. It's very dull. Mix can't pick us up, but you can still see what's going on. But that obviously attracted piss moths, the old piss moth. Burns your skin when they piss on you, and it's itchy and it stinks like shit. Piss moth, I think it's called in English. What we used to do is then you take your trusty R4 and you take the rounds, you take the bullet part of it, the copper tip part of it in the vise, you wiggle that out and you make as many as you want, 20 or 30 rounds. And we used to just lay there in our little bivvy tent thing, and then with this lamp will attract the piss moths. And then you take your 1,000 bar out of your rack pack. Okay, you throw out all the gunpowder. There's no gunpowder in it. You just use the primer bit of it, and you push it into your chocolate bar. So you got like a wax gun, and and you obviously have to cock the damn thing every time. And we used to shoot these piss moths at nighttime, as that was our entertainment. I'm sure the other boys had done it as well. And, obviously when it's appropriate or safe to do so. And that was big fun as well, shooting these piss moths, because they, as you know, they're horrible little things. And of course, one day I was laying like this, Chris, and it was a bit of a relaxing time. I mean, we've also had a bit of a break here, there. Our foxhole was dug. We used to dig a community foxhole. And anyway, the long and the short of it is, I was laying like this. And the other boys were there as well, and our vehicles were all hunky-dory, and all was good. And Chris, honestly, here comes this snake. I don't know what snake it was, of course. It was a serious snake, because when we arrived in our first base with the first convoy, the guys used to tell us that there's kaboom vipers there, and they got heads as big as a dog's head, and we were shit scared of this. It's all just a bit of bantering going on and blah blah blah. That I remember that first night I used to sleep on my quaffles on the bonnet, on that grill part, in the sleeping bag, scared of these fucking snakes. Anyway, here comes this snake, but I'm sure how snakes operate. He was just curious. He wasn't really interested in biting me or whatever. You know what I mean? So he lifted his head up between my legs as I'm laying there, and he checks me out, but I didn't really notice that he was there, okay? And he just checks out the moves. He had no interest. He wasn't ready to fire or cocked over or anything. I don't know what type of snake it is, if you know what I mean. But the first thing that went through my mind is that this fucking thing is going to bite me. Of course, honestly, no word of lie. I made, from that position, laying flat like this, hey? I made a back somersault. Have you ever made a back somersault like that? Oh man. Anyway, yeah, that's part of the funny things, Chris. It's happened, and and then the 3 months, it came to an end. I think it was after February. The big show with the Rattles with 61 Mach. I think it was called Bloody Valentine's Day. That was all done and dusted. The boys have done their job. Yes, we've had losses. We've heard a lot of stuff over the radio, which I've kept all these years for myself, because they're the heroes, especially when I listen to Marco and all the guys. I mean, yourself and all the other our hierarchy. People. I think we were all part of it. Unknowingly, we were all part of Brothers in Arms. The lady that sang the Lomba song. It hits hard, man. I get tears in my eyes when I listen to that song. And of course, I don't drink anymore, but yeah. Those type of songs, they hit hard, if you know what I mean. And of course, the last little bit is when we towed the vehicle out. I was shaving my beard off there in a little river there, and I was having a bit of a yak there with the Bushmans and exchanging rat packs, if you know what I mean, and giving them food, because by then we know that we're actually leaving Angola. There was no way or thinking in my mind that our convoy or the convoy that's going back was that convoy. We were part of a convoy that's going out to get some more supplies. So what happened then is our Witting started burning a lot of oil. For some reason, ours was part of the sacrifice that had to happen, of course, and that particular vehicle on that photograph also had some problems that couldn't be fixed in time. I mean, we're part of a convoy. There was no way they're going to fly in spare parts for us. So we decided to hook it up, and all the other vehicles of the convoy were safe. They were going, they were all fueled up. So they left enough fuel in that vehicle for us so we could, at our own pace, I think there was about 3 days still of traveling. I call it in days because I had no idea where we are. I can show you on maps, or if you're taking me on that road, I can show you a lot of things. But that was basically the last ditch before we hit that bridge, that metal bridge on our way to Rundu course, and we just hit that engine with, and that goes back to how tough those engines really are. Of course, we had no engine oil anymore. We're in the middle of an Angola. What do you do? So that poor engine just digested all the engine oil, digested all the gear oil we had, all the hydraulic oil we had, all the steering oil, any oil we still had in our possession. We just chucked it in and it chewed it up, and it took us all the way. Well, by the way, at Rundu, we unhooked that vehicle there because it's no way we're going to tow it all the way back to. But that's the only vehicle we had, and obviously there we got some more engine oil at Rundu. But damage was done, that engine was finished. So when we arrived at Grootfontein, the guys that was in that convoy expected us to go back, knowingly that we had problems with the engine, but they didn't know the severity of the engine. They didn't know how bad that engine was. We don't have a phone number or something that we can text or phone them and say, listen, we have to change this engine over. It's going to take at least 2 or 3 days. We didn't even know if they've had a spare engine. Maybe they did. But then we also caught up with our other buddies that stayed behind for the 3 months at Grootfontein and said, mate, die Flossie tel ons op oor 2 dae. Julle kan nie teruggaan nie, ons gaan huis toe. You know what I mean? And that was all over, of course. I mean, I've had family, a wife and a kid at home. There was no way I was going to go back. So what then happened is there was a sergeant major. I can't remember his name. Maybe he will remember who he was. He radioed into Grootfontein from his office. That dude and his co-dude, they need to come back to Rundu. What's it called? Walking out of a war zone. AWOL, like AWOL out of a out of a war zone was the so-called aanklagte, or the what's the name you want to call it? Because I'm not sure. It's
Charts.
and yeah,
I think it's off
pardon.
the charts.
That's right. So yeah, we had a shower, put some clean clothes in the next morning at least, you know. Bummed the lift. I can't even remember the vehicle we got. We bummed the lift back to Rundu. And I remember us laying there in like a little, it was like a little tent there in Rundu, you know, your fucking ass is doing this, you know, that's a pretty serious crime, you know. Anyway, so here goes to the Tiffy part of it, course, and yeah, so it was finally time for us to march into his office. You know, you do all the military stuff, and we started talking a little bit, and then he said, "You guys realize this is all in Afrikaans, and realize that some year so and so he was in charge of." The recovery guys. He was the big knob of recovery guys. You know, I don't know who he was because remember I was a Tiffy. I wasn't a recovery, if you know what I mean. But I've just done 3 months worth of recovery, and if you go back now to instead of hitting me over the head, if you train me to do recovery and fix rattles, it would have been a lot. I know it does major, but we're not recovery personnel. We don't work or fall under some year so and so and so and so. We are Tiffies. And he immediately knew, hang on, how's this going to stack up in the military court? And he changed his tune. Back then, of course, there was no Medal of Honor, there was no nothing. It was, you know, no dog tags. We were just told to write our magsnommer on all our clothes inside the pocket. And I remember he took us to another office and he said to the guy in the office there, like an office jockey, and no disrespect, he just said to him, "Klaar hierdie manne nou uit. Hierdie manne gaan huis toe." And that was it. So when we hit Grootfontein, like I said, now I don't drink anymore, but yeah, I caught up with some of my buddies. Etienne, the one guy that you saw there when we changed the engine over, and mate, we hit the piss. We were just, we just beer after we got smashed. But yeah, that's my story, course. I hope there's any value in it. And yeah.
I must tell you, Dries, if no one has ever said thank you, I will. Thank you.
No,
because
thank
I
you
think
for
what
having
you
me.
guys did was marvelous. It's fantastic. I mean, people should remember this is behind enemy lines. There's no air support. The enemy makes us circling. You don't know when that fopla or the other side's going to break through and overrun you.
Yeah.
And then you have to do all of these things in the night with, and you know, during the day also, you don't have all the equipment. And it's a harsh terrain, and you're all alone. And you guys just went out and did it. No, I take my hat off for you guys. I think the Tiffy's one of those units, you know, which didn't get enough thanks. And I hope that many, many more Tiffys will come here and tell us stories. And I'm sure they're going to tell us their stories. And I would be most grateful.
I'm sure they will, Chris, and I hope they do, because then they can emphasize what I've and like you say, there was no special tools, Chris. It was on. I mean, we didn't even have simple things like a proper torch, you know. So in the middle of the night, you know, we have to make our little lead light or little light, you know, by pinching a vehicle's tail light and run wires, you know, and you want to loosen that screw, you know. How do you get there if the light is too short? You either have to bring a vehicle closer or pinch a battery, or, you know, jump starting a vehicle when the vehicles are all in a convoy, you know. Of course, we had to make a plan. So what do you do? There's no manual. You can't go through the manual. You can't call the sergeant. I mean, the sergeant wasn't there. You know, you have to go on your instinct. You know, you have to forget about that knop on the cop when that sergeant has hit you. You know, and you gotta use the grey mat and think, shit, you know, I've got to get these vehicles going. I'm a Tiffy. I said I'll do it. And funny enough, of course, what we did with the vehicles, if the middle vehicle has got good batteries and that can start, and say for instance, I can't remember exactly how many vehicles, but of course sometimes it was 2 or 3 in the front and maybe 2 or 3 in the back, all right, but they won't be, they can't start. They without having to take out the batteries. All you want to do is really get these vehicles going so that they can catch up with the convoy. And this is interesting as well, because like I say, there's no manuals. This is all just things that we come up with. So what we've done is, of course, they all bumper to bumper. It's just a two plus pikey, you know, the sand road, the dirt road with the little, and then, so there's no way you can get that vehicle, that's the good one, out of there. So what we've done is, of course, we take all the jumping cables we can get, okay? Because the jumping cables is not long enough to put into the middle vehicle and go to the, say, for instance, the second one or the third one, jumpstart him, let him scoot off. They just simply weren't long enough, because you need a positive and a negative, yeah? So what we've done is, of course, we take all the cables we can get, any type of cable that's got a bit of a guts. And what we've done is we actually hooked them all together to make it as long as possible. Trust me, it worked, and it did work. And then, funny enough, as you know, with the camo nets that sticks to everything. Have you ever tried to put a camo net on a military vehicle on your own? And you can't. Sometimes you feel like you want to tear this thing apart. You can't. It's too strong, you know. And every vehicle had a machete or a panga. Okay, every vehicle had one, because that was part of their kitters to chop fresh camouflage for the mix, yeah. And believe me, it does work, because we had to do it on a regular basis. So then what we do is, of course, we take the panga or the machete, where the vehicles are bumper to bumper against each other. The military vehicles, they used a very good paint, that military brown with the primer. Now, even if the vehicle is bumper to bumper against each other, there's still no contact there for the negative, because your battery still goes to earth. That's your negative, okay? So what we've done is, each vehicle in between that doesn't make contact for the negative, we take the panga, we hit it hard on that paint and scrape most of the paint off just on that small little piece there, and use the panga between the two, or the machete, to complete the circle for the negative part of the battery, and then use our long positive cable, and then we'll jump start the first vehicle and tell him to scoot off, and then the second one. And that's how we managed to get them going. And remember, because this is all in the night, you know, it's not all just plug and play. There's none of that. We had to come up with ideas, and like you said, we're puncture. There's no jack that's going to jack that thing high enough. If you know, you dig a hole, mate. You dig a hole in that sand. Luckily, Angola, as you know, was underground, under sea for many years before Christ was born. So the sand made it a lot easier to dig a foxhole, or to repair repair a puncture. Sometimes it was easier not even bother taking the wheel off, you know, just take the tube, take the tire, dig the hole, take the tube off, or whatever, push a new tube in and inflate the tire. So yeah, of course, I mean, there's lots and lots and lots of things that the Tiffys had done that you'll never find that in a book. It was all just ingeniously created, and I would, like you say, encourage them as well, my fellow Tiffys, to come up and speak up and tell. It's just going to make it so much more interesting for all of us from the technical side, if you know what I mean. I can recall the Wittings. The part of our recovery is we got that kinetic rope, you know, the kinetic ropes. They come in different weights, but the military one was a thick. That was a serious kinetic rope. Of course, we used to pull out vehicles out of shaunas and mud, you know, with the kinetic ropes. That rope gets hot because it's energy. When you pull that thing, and then when the other vehicle, it releases that, you know, you create the energy and it releases, and it pulls this kweevoel or buffel or whatever with a big speed. It pulls it, and it sort of almost looks as if it wants to take off, you know, and there was so many things we done, of course, that's, you know, that's you won't find it in books, you know, and as small as it sounds, and how uninteresting it sounds, it's real. It really did happen. It's not a artificially story or anything like that. And I want to thank you as well for what you do, and my other fellow South African friends and Mikeys and high-ranking people, and the sergeant that hit me on the head. You know, I think I lost a few brain cells. You know, if you know what I mean. But yeah, that's my story, Chris. That's it. That's part of, yeah. I must say, but I would leave it for hopefully other people come. We did launch some more attacks with those rocket launchers as well, Chris. We done those boys, and they were good at it, Chris. They were accurate. They were a no nonsense bunch of guys. We obviously shot them without that drag ring that goes around its neck. It was also called in Afrikaans the Heilende Dood. We shot maximum, so maximum thing. And I know for sure that Manong Airport was, there was an attempt from us with those rockets to hit them hard, because the recce's has informed us that the MiGs were not sleeping, or some of the MiGs weren't sleeping in their bunkers, you know, those sand bunkers or whatever you want to call it. And a few of them were having drinks in the pub, so it was the right time to hit them. We hit them with those MVL. Of course, the sergeant major said to me that night, he said, "Oh, we're just going to shake the beehive a little bit, Dries. We're just going to shake the beehive a little bit." And we did shake the beehive a little bit, of course, with those MVL. And I would, one of those operators would come forward and have a bit of a yak with it. And tell us their part of the story. It will make it so much more interesting. You know, Esvia, he knows about them as well a little bit. And then I want to thank Esvia, because I watched Esvia on Legacy, and I didn't even know you, Koos. I didn't know who Samuel 4 was, Koos. And I thought, you know, this is a platform where after 40 years, I think this is the platform, this is the place, this is the motivation from Esvia. I mean, my mouth was hanging open when I heard what they've done and what they've been through. And I thought, this is my chance to tell for the history books, you know.
I always wanted to say this, but you've heard it first on Legacy.
I did. I did, of course I did, and it's a good chance for you to maybe create us a nice. We can all pay for creators a nice T-shirt, you know. I've been on Legacy with Koos, or I've heard it first on Legacy Conversations, you know, or a little. Because Legacy is good. The quality is very high. It's you know, for a person, because for a person to talk these talks and talk these things where people have lost their lives, where your own life is in danger, because you know, because you live, as you can understand, you live close to God. We used to open with prayers, because, but you know, when you're in that foxhole, you know, and the bad things go through your mind, you know, your eardrums can burst, you know, the thing can actually hit the foxhole itself, and you're gone, you know. So you pray, because and there's no BS in that, you know. You trust your maker, you trust your own faith, and to speak these things from the heart. There's no cheat sheet or crypt note or anything here with me. I'm speaking from the heart, and I'm recalling parts in my brain that I've put away for 40 years, because I've like I said, from my childhood days, I've had a bit of a rough life, if you know what I mean. But I'm not like a rattle or a buffle that I can call a Tiffy to come and fix me. You know, I got to get the cop Tiffy or the cop doctor or whatever you want to call it, you know. Or I got to get the gun Tiffy to sort me out, or, you know, there's a few loose screws. But of course, yeah, Legacy is is brilliant. It's good to me. It's helped me a lot. Personally, you've helped me a lot, and I thank you. I thank you for your input, and one for the history.
Dries, thank you. I appreciate that. We are thinking actually on a T-shirt for everybody who participated. And then we thought, well, everybody has a different body size. So Rebecca came up with the idea of perhaps a cap saying I was on legacy. We'll see how it goes. I've really enjoyed the last 3 hours. And I think your message is one of hope. It still astonished me that you people could go into those conditions, fix those vehicles, and let the other guys carry on with the job. They couldn't do it without you. It's that simple. Even they say so. And so I want to say to anybody and everybody listening here, you were not unimportant. And you're still not unimportant. Come and talk to me. Bring us your story before it is too late. And if you have any questions for Dries, leave it here below. And if needs be, I'll bring him back. It's very late in Australia now. It's way past his sleep time. I'm sure his wife's going to say a few words to me. But thank you, Dries. And until we meet again, God bless.
Thank you, Koos.